Testing. Okay, there we go. There we go. Now you should be able to hear me speak. Ta-da! Okay, can you guys hear me now? That was so weird. Ta-da! Okay, so let me do that thing again. So that was somebody forgets to turn off the music and they don't let you know that the music stopped. I'm starting to get used to that music. We'll probably bring it down a little bit, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, but I definitely needed the 5 minutes to get everything set up. And the reason why is because camera. So I know I'm getting progressive and more Wave Pro with this. So first and foremost, thank you everybody for joining us. This is I think our fifth or sixth live stream on our regularly scheduled Sunday. The time is actually I think working out fairly decent, at least from this end. And the reason why is gives me the opportunity to get the girls home, hand them off to their mother to put them to bed, and walk the dog so I don't have to do it in the middle of the stream, and now we can go on. But the really cool part is a lot of our guests are from the other side of the country, so for them, it's also a good opportunity as well. So first and foremost, thank you very much. I appreciate all support. I see a couple of channel members that are on here as well. So thank you, Buzz. Derek, thank you for joining, buddy. Michael Walker, thank you. This is actually a couple of streams in a row. We'll definitely get into those. Oh yeah, we'll talk about that one in particular. We are going to be, so first, a fair warning. So I posted some pictures. I have 4 Arken optics. So I have my Arken SH4 Gen 2. Don't mind this. We're definitely Then I have the 2 new ones. So I actually also have an Arken EP5. I didn't have an opportunity to take that one off of the gun because I still want to shoot some previous scope footage to prove that it's broken. And then I do have the 2 new ones. So this is the Arken SH4J, stands for Japanesium. So this one is the new one, and then the Arken EPL4. So both of these are 6-24, but this is built off of 30mm tube. Both of these scopes, so in disclosure, these are not my scopes. They are meant for another gun tuber who can't get his hands on them temporarily. So I have them, and then probably tomorrow or Tuesday, I'm going to be mailing it off to him, and he'll do the full review. But I'm like, hey, you know what? Since the scopes are here, let me absolutely get my hands on them. I took them out to the range. Was able to put quite a few rounds through them and compare them to my SH4. So this one is mine, and then I have an EP5, which is also mine, but once again, that's still going to be on the gun. I did have these out on centerfire and rimfire guns. So along the same lines, what we're working on right now is, so we have the Springfield 2020 rimfire, and just kind of to deal with all of that hoopla and whether the gun is accurate or not, I decided to compare it to 3 other rimfires. So we have the Ruger Precision Rimfire, the Ruger American Rimfire Regular, and then the Ruger American Rimfire Long Range Target, which is just what an awesome gun. Oh, and I have Noguchi 1022. But the Ruger American Rimfire, what a fantastic gun. I mean, it was on there. We were blasting away at 300 yards all day long. And this is actually 2 trips in a row, which unfortunately, unfortunately, I think one of my goals was I wanted to stretch those guns out to 500 or 600, 700 yards with rimfire 22s. But I was at the range and decided to be a good person. I brought out some friends to the range, and they've never really shot that far. So I'm like, all right, fine, let's make sure that you can shoot that far, and you're able to get them out to 7. Well, depending on from which angle you're shooting at in our range, the furthest we can go is 720. So we were able to get them out there, and basically now with the sun going down at like 5:30, I was just like, all right, that's it, I'm done with those. So we're going to talk about each of those optics. Um, I'm going to try to get through all the super chats as soon as they come in, and I think so. We're going to discuss the stuff, and then I'm hoping we should be able to be joined by Mr. Dark Lord of Optics himself, and actually talk about specifically on the optics, um, the value side of it, and why we've had the issues or lack of issues with some of the optics at these various price points. So definitely looking forward to that. So I see there's a bunch of people joining in. Once again, thank you everybody. Thank you to all the members. If you're not a channel member yet, you can join by tuning right about there. You can support the channel by sending a super chat. We'll definitely address all those questions. And now I guess let's go right into it. So which one should we handle first? All right, so I'm going to put off the optics one for a second. I'm going to go through this one. I like that the new Ruger American long range target is a pretty cool featured gun, ready for long range rimfire competitions. What do you think of it? Is it more accurate than the regular 1022? Yes. So the biggest thing, so if you haven't seen the pictures, basically imagine a Ruger American rimfire target with a much heavier bull barrel and in a proper stock. So a heavy target grip, actual stock, adjustable comb height, adjustable length of pull. Length of pull adjusts with spacers, but the comb height uses kind of like that Ruger precision require right on that. And then solid laminate stock with a nice epoxy finish on it. And then it has M-lock rails on the bottom and a couple of UV swivel stuff. So it's such a nice gun. It feels really, really solid in the hand. I would say, so I mean, I only probably have about 200 rounds for the gun right now. But even with regular crappy CCI Blazer, um, it was shooting at 50 yards less than an inch. I mean, it was just right on there. I mean, like, I didn't have any issues. This was off of a tripod. So it was the first time I brought it out to the range yesterday, and I had the SH4J mounted to it. And really, the premise with it was I wasn't necessarily testing the gun, but I was testing the scope, and that's the one that we mounted the side shot scope cam to, so you can see footage directly through that gun as we're shooting it. So my first impressions on it, I definitely liked the heft of the gun. It definitely felt really, really solid. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, now you can also upgrade the trigger on there, which is going to be nicer, and then the action should smooth out a little bit more. I did have a couple of feeding issues, but I believe it's because I wasn't really running the bolt and feeding out a 1022 magazine. So I believe some will probably be a little bit easier than others. I do think a good upgrade would be to replace the bolt handle on there with something bigger so it can give you a little bit more leverage. But from an accuracy perspective, I think it should be a really, really good gun. Interestingly, so go back and watch the video that I did with that one. Go back and watch the video that I did with that gun SHOT Show, not this year, but the year before. And you're going to see a gentleman there from Ruger that we did the interview with. That's Mark Jeremy, who's the head of product development at Ruger. And speaking with him, I mean, like, he was excited about the gun. I was excited about the gun, but it is actually his favorite rimfire target, rimfire rifle that he shoots over the precision rimfire. So, and I believe actually the barrel on that one is a little bit heavier. So it's a proper, really, really nice rifle. It definitely feels really solid. And for the money, I think it's going to be a good value. And I have no doubts that we'll be able to hit 400 or 500 yards with it with proper rimfire. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. I am going to prioritize that one. and I'm going to try to have both those. So you're going to see a series of videos. We're going to do the Springfield 2020. We're going to do the Ruger American Rimfire Standard, Ruger American Precision. I'm sorry, Ruger American Long Range Target, and Ruger Precision Rimfire Rifle. We'll do them all in a row. And then I do have a couple of 1022s. I don't have the matched 1022s, but I do have my Gucci 1022, which was the one we also did the video on. That was the Azimuth Precision AZTP 22 barrel one. And even out of a 16-inch barrel, that thing shot lights out. So all three of those guns, even with the cheaper, crappier ammo, have shot better than the Springfield 2020 Rimfire. It's as simple as that. So that was basically that on that rifle. Hopefully that answered that question. I see our guest is here. So I'm going to go through the scopes and then I'm going to bring him on. All right, so how about those new Arkens? So I gave the disclosure on these scopes. Michael, I'm kind of scrolling through the questions a little bit ahead. We're going to definitely... Oh my, today is 10/22 day. I am a douche. Yes, you're right. Define my audio is horrible. Okay, so we're going to talk about the audio. Somebody should tell me if it's like really bad. Hold on. Why don't you guys tell me my audio is really bad? Hello. What's going on? Okay. I'm like looking at the levels here. Okay, so what we're going to do is give me 1 second. I'm going to plug this in over there while I bring our guest on. And
Hello. Okay, he's gonna try to figure out the audio. Do I sound more human without all the hissing and buzzing? Or is my audio also having issues? Anyone? Anyone at all?
I know why my audio.
I am in the waterfall? How interesting. I sound well, thank you. Do I look okay too? Just wondering.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think you found it.
we live in a world where crap is broken. Rode, yeah, fully charged, it doesn't work. So let me get a proper mic. All right, we'll do it this way.
Here's that Eastern European accent and clear Dolby. Who are you calling Dolby? Or was that Dolby? One of them.
There might be a little bit of an audio delay. All right.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Oh, okay, so this should be a lot better.
It is much better.
It was a little hot. Is this better? Better.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, you people should let me know ahead of time. So basically what it is, so I was using the wireless one in order to avoid. I turn it on even though it seems like it's fully charged, and then it immediately turns off. Weird. Freaking Rode. That's what happened. So, and okay, for all my friends, for all my YouTuber friends who always poke fun of me that like I have like professional audio equipment, this is consumer grade stuff, and this is why it fails.
No.
So
$20 headset, no issues.
And we're gonna get the party started. Ta-da! Perfect. Right. I still think if audio's still a little hot, just do tell me, and then we will definitely fix that.
You sound fine. I mean, you don't look any better, but you sound fine.
Oh, you bastards. Awesome. All right. So thank you for bearing with us. Awesome that the sound is good, and hopefully it should be a minimal delay, if any, between them. All right. So, Mr. Leah, I think I went to the range and I've played and I've compared a couple of the new scopes that I think you totally, absolutely love. Or at least we would love to get you to do some videos on, and that's basically going to be the two Arken scopes. So we have the SH4J, where the J stands for Japanesium, and then we have their new, I think it's a solution in search of a problem, personally, the EPL4, which is their lightweight series scope. And I went out to the range with both. I will say that this must be a really, really good sample. I compared this directly to my EP5 and the Arken SH4 Gen 2. Shot it out, looked through it out to 750 yards. Basically, on the outside, it's exactly identical to the SH4 Gen 2, with the exceptions of now the logo is bigger. So this logo right on top is going to be a little bit bigger. We do have apparently Japanese ED glass up front, and now they have a couple of different reticle options. So these are now available in a clean reticle, which we call the variable hunting reticle, and also available in the standard Arken VPR, or variable precision rifle reticle. And so image quality seemed to be a little bit better. I had no problem seeing hits on steel at 700 yards or so. Oh, the other thing that's bigger is the Made in China sticker here is now definitely bigger than it was on others. And it seems like this is the same Made in China sticker that you find on like cheap dollar store items. On the prior scopes, it actually was not even anywhere here. There was no sticker. And I believe it had Made in China somewhere else on the scope. I don't exactly recall where, but there was no big Made in China sticker on there. But basically here we have the SH4 Gen 2. And so that's basically the logo that they used on there. And then we have the SH4J, which is the Japanesium one. So turrets, everything feels exactly the same. I will say, so the biggest takeaway was not even necessarily this scope, but the biggest, I would say, complaint that people have so far had with Arken, which was, it made me realize, I'm like, okay, well, I don't think the cheaper SH4J is supposed to be better than the Arken EP5. So one of the things we discussed, and so earlier this year, about 2 months ago, I was down in Tennessee. I have the Arken EP5 5-25 mounted on my Ruger American rifle, Gucci'd out in a chassis and all that stuff in 6.5 Grendel. Out to 500, 600, 700 yards, image quality was just fine. I felt it was consistent for the price point that we were looking at. We got out to about 1,000 yards, it starts getting a little bit fuzzy, and I'm like, okay, well, it's like, I don't know. I think there might be something off with it. And then past 1,100 yards, it was just blurry. And I was just using my hopes and dreams, and we were able to actually hit at 1,550 yards. And then so I just really was kind of like, okay, well, this is probably what it is. And then I put this scope on. I'm like, wait, this is better than I thought it was supposed to be. And it made me realize, hey, you know what? This is actually, I can actually see bullet holes with this one, the cheaper scope, at 600 yards. I can't see it with my EP5, which apparently has the same glass. And it made me realize, yep, it's like the parallax moves, but it doesn't actually become sharp at any point in time. So realistically, the scope failed to focus at anything past 500 yards on the EP5. And I was just like, okay, well, it kind of goes back to, so I have my own personal Arken scopes, and then there are scopes that I've had temporarily. And with these, it now makes the count 50% of the Arken scopes that have come across or that I've had or played with, there is something wrong with them. So that's 3 scopes that now have parallax issues. And there's one of them that basically came and the turret seized up. So the turret seized up were on the SH4 Gen 1. And the parallax issues are 2 SH4 Gen 2s. And now my Arken EP5. So it's like, it seems like, so kind of like with Arkens, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are already even interested with this, is for the money. I mean, if you're literally just going down the box and it needs to check off features, 32 mils of internal elevation adjustment, Japanese ED glass, you have really nice feeling turrets, very audible, very tactile. The reticle is decent. I mean, it's definitely not my favorite reticle, but it's perfectly usable. It does have illuminated center crosshair on that, and it checks off everything that you need to do, especially for the price point. But it seems like it is so damn inconsistent with either people getting one that actually works or it doesn't. And there doesn't seem to be like this happy medium in between where, like, okay, well, it does this, but you have to have realistic expectations, because it doesn't seem like that there is that medium. It's either people who are swearing by them. And I personally believe, so kind of like my take on it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll have to go back and edit the video. But my conclusion really with these scopes came down to is the people who swear by the optics are going to be those people. They're going to buy it. They are going to be limited on the budget. And they're never going to put it into a position where they would actually need to make, like, where the issues with the scope wouldn't necessarily hold them back. So they might shoot a 3, 4, 500 yard stops. They're never going to take it beyond that, versus somebody who is, let's say, for example, it's the people who are screaming, oh, it's like anything under $2,000 is complete garbage. And those are the types of people who they might end up spending $1,000 or $2,000 every couple of months to go shoot their PRS or NRL match down somewhere else. And when you're talking about $300, even if it's $3,000, it's probably one of the less expensive parts of their kit. In which case, look, if you already spent $2,000 between the match fee, the ammo, putting on a new barrel, traveling to a match, you probably want to make sure that your gear is not going to hold you back. So it seems like that there's the 1% gun owners who absolutely will run their equipment at the ragged edge, who are basically going to shit on this because, well, yeah, I mean, like, once you start taking it past 1,000 yards or shooting it in poor conditions, or if you're actually shooting in conditions where parallax or image quality is actually going to matter, yeah, you're definitely going to say, okay, well, it's okay for the money, but it's not a good scope. And then you're going to have the vast majority of the buyers who buy into the hype, buy into the value proposition, which I do think the value proposition is there, but they're never going to take the scope to its extreme limits and actually have to depend on the features. And so I saw you comment on the value. So what's your take on that?
If half of them ship with a problem of some sort, the value is not there.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. It's as simple as that. Look, here's the stick. I don't talk about Arken very much because I kind of want them to do well. I mean, I like what they're trying to pull off.
Yeah.
But we also don't talk about them too much because the product, I have an SH4 Gen 2 here, which is actually quite nice, probably a good sample. But I've talked to quite a few people who have bought them, and it's been hit and miss. And here's a basic problem for me, as a guy who gets paid to review scopes, essentially, right? It's very difficult for me to... I do not want to do a video on Arken because I do not know what a representative Arken is. Is it 50% of the scopes that work, or is it 50% of the scopes that don't?
Yeah.
And on top of it, right, if you, basically if a rifle scope company has a new model every year, right, and phases something out, and I'm just not going to review anything because I spend months on this stuff. And it is, if they're going to phase it out in a year, then I'm not interested. Because nothing ever develops enough of a track record to be worth anything.
Yeah.
As far as who's going to be, vast majority of the people I know who bought them and are happy with them, they shoot at 100 yards off the bench in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you do that, I mean, a lot of things generally work. And here's the catch. Arken is doing a lot of things right in terms of the feature content and all that.
Yeah.
But, some years ago, I wrote a long piece, about 40,000 words, I think, called Fundamentals of Rifle Scopes. I need to revise it and stuff. And I think I started with this whole thing. The scope, the fundamentals have to be done correctly before you look at the features. And what are the fundamentals? It has to, first and foremost, once zeroed, it has to stay zeroed. And that Arkens tend to do reasonably well.
Yeah.
Adjustments need to be consistent. They don't need to be accurate. If the scope, instead of 0.1 milliradian click, has a 0.09 click, but does it every time, and you're on a budget, that's okay, because you could figure out.
So for
this,
you're referring to tracking error, I guess.
Correct. Tracking error is not important as long as it adjusts the same every time.
Okay, so as long as it's consistent.
Once you pay a lot of money, tracking error starts getting important. If you go back and forth between scopes and all that. On cheap scope, it has to stay zeroed. Adjustments have to be consistent. They have to work the same way every time. And image quality has to be good enough for what you're planning to look at. If on 3 of them parallax is broken, that means the basic fundamentals are not satisfied. If there's hysteresis and parallax, I don't care. It can be worked out, but it has to adjust. You have to be able to dial it in, because you know what happens if you are not able to dial in parallax on a side focus equipped scope? You're picking up parallax error.
Yeah.
Okay. I spend a lot of time looking and getting anecdotal data on whether I believe the scopes are manufactured in a reasonably consistent way, not occasional lemon, right? Everybody makes an occasional lemon, but in a reasonably consistent way. Arken right now is at a stage where I am not motivated to do reviews on it.
Yeah,
I'm keeping track of it. I'm looking at it. Some things seem to be getting better. Some things are not. Yeah. Other things, I have looked at a few, and the optical design is not mature, basically. What I mean by that is that it was done by people who do optics but don't do rifle scopes.
Okay.
Some key things like flare, control, and other things are completely ignored. Some aspects of eyepiece design to make it easier to get behind, etc., completely ignored.
And I think that's one of the biggest complaint points. I mean, I'm not even going into that aspect of it. I mean, I just even had issues with, so I guess the SH4J is actually fine, and I don't think I had issues with the EPL4, but the Arken EP5, which basically is like, well, it just confirmed that, okay, yeah, there's definitely issues with that one. But then, yeah, we get into the whole design aspect, and I think anybody who's compared scopes, even at this price point, even if you're comparing the eye relief, and the eye relief is going to be shallower on the Arkens versus a lot of our competitors, and then you're talking about the eye box, it is so difficult to get properly behind the scope that almost that anything, so even on a 6-24 or a 5-25, anything past 16 power magnification, it's incredibly difficult to use, because if you even just move your face like out of it a little bit, you can't see anything. And then obviously then you still have the loss of image quality as you crack up the magnification because the amount of light coming in, so you have those issues. But for some reason it seems like every single Arken product, the eye box is very, very shallow, and other scopes don't generally seem to suffer from that issue.
Look, I'm going to make some educated guesses here, right? Because I don't look at Arken all that carefully, so I don't have specific information. So I'll make some educated guesses. And I do this once in a while, and I am yet to be wrong. I suspect that Arken is talking to some OEM in China that has not been doing stuff for the Western market very much. Some smaller OEM, something like that, who were very hungry. They did a design. They're offering Arken very, very good price. They're taking input. There are probably some decent engineers there, but they don't shoot. That's most likely what happened.
Yep.
Most people who design rifle scopes don't shoot. They don't have a very clear understanding what's what. So the guys
Interesting.
in charge of Arken, they shoot, right?
Yes.
Riley is a former Navy SEAL, right? So there are shooters. So, but they're not optics people. They can't do an optical design. They can't evaluate optical design to the best of my knowledge, right? They're shooters. So why does Arken turrets have a very good feel? Well, one of the owners of Arken is a Navy SEAL guy, and he's spent a lot of time dialing turrets, and he wanted a good feel. So he went to the OEM and says, I want this to have very, very good turrets. The OEM went and reverse engineered some turret out there that they found some other scope, and most likely, and made a good turret on the outside. Is it a good turret on the inside? Probably not, because it's not something that you see and feel. And quite a few Arkens that I've talked to people to have seen have inconsistent tracking.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's a part you don't see. So why do you have inconsistent tracking? The contact pad between the bottom of the turret stem and the erector is probably done inconsistently. There are some kind of a know-how things that scope manufacturers develop certain know-how, certain tricks on how to do it correctly after some practice. It takes time to develop the expertise to do so. Iterating models all the time to try to capture market share before the product is ready, I'm not convinced that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't like to badmouth them because they're pushing the price, they're pushing the competition, and a lot of people seem to be happy. More power to them. Until I have some sort of confidence that the product quality has stabilized, I'm not reviewing them.
Yeah.
Okay. Still making sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I think that's actually kind of like one of the big ones. So, I mean, so when they work, I absolutely love the value proposition that you're getting. And for example, for this particular SH4J, so this is, I think, the latest ones that they came out with, it's a damn good scope. And you know what? For $300, yeah, for $300,
if you have to preface the phrase about value proposition with when they work,
yes,
then it's an oxymoron, right?
Correct. So I think one of the quotes, and so earlier in the year when the SH4 Gen 2 came out, not the J, when the regular SH4 Gen 2 came out, I did a video comparing that to the Vortex Venom. And I basically came to the conclusion that, hey, it's like if you're just an everyday gun owner who wants a good quality scope that's going to be good enough for them, go get the Vortex Venom. It's going to get you the vast majority of things that you need, and it's backed by Vortex. So if you have any issues, yes, there will always be lemons. In my opinion, there are some things that the Vortex did a little bit better. I think I like the color renditions a little bit more on them. It was a little bit less capable of a scope in terms of feature set, but I liked the overall value and the fact that it's made by Vortex. With the Arken SH4, I basically said, yes, it is a great scope, but only if you have the ability to determine whether there's a problem with the scope or there's a problem with you as the shooter. Because if you don't, I mean, because
okay, I'm going to have to stop you right there. If you have that ability, you are not shooting with an Arken. I mean, it's just the truth, right? If you're experienced enough to figure that out, chances are you're going to eat ramen for a little bit, and you're gonna step up to something else.
Okay, but this is actually where we do have, this is where we do have to talk about value. So me and you and our gun tuber buddies, we are going to actually go out and we're going to shoot past 400, 500, 600 yards. I know you hunt at those distances as well. We have the ability, both from the monetary side, we have the ability to, in Russian, позволить. Мы себе можем позволить. We can.
It's called can afford.
Yeah, we can afford it. We can swing it. We can justify it. It's not going to take food off of the table. But when the vast majority of Americans, they're not going to go shoot past 300 yards, or 500 yards is extreme long range to them. Well, and if their budget is $400 or $500, then basically
there are plenty of options that hold up just fine.
Yes, but they're going to go online, they're going to go on YouTube, they're going to see all of these influencers, and hey, look, it's like the Arken is the best bang for the buck. You have amazing turret feel on there. I mean, no one actually talks about the when they work part of it, but people kind of buy into the hoopla, and that's what I think my personal issue with it is. It's not even necessarily the problem with the scope. I have an issue with the way that the marketing was done with it and how people put this on a pedestal. And God forbid you say anything negative or fair about it, then you're just going to get killed by both sides of it, by the fanboys of Night Force, Loofbold. It's like, hey, don't buy an Arken SH4. It's like, what do you mean you can't afford a ZCO? If you can't afford a ZCO, you shouldn't be shooting.
Well, look, but that's yeah, you get that on the high here and there and stuff, and like look at me talking, I shoot with tangentators, right?
Yeah,
but not only tangentators. I have a pretty broad range of stuff here. The point is that in the modern market, you have to get, if you're getting a scope,
yes,
at this stage, there is no excuse to not get a scope with solid fundamentals, because they do exist. They are in a comparable price range. They may not be as feature rich, but you always have to take fundamentals over the features.
Okay.
It's basically that. And once again, I have a suspicion that Arken is going to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are signs that it's going in that direction. It's just going to take a little bit more time.
Yeah. I mean, I will say from the fit and finish from the outside, this is definitely a lot better than prior products. I will say the turret feel is now much more consistent. Some of the earlier products, the turret feel wasn't even consistent. And from the looks of it, this one actually is going to be just fine. But the question then basically comes down to, okay, well, for the price point, what are we sacrificing? So this is a $400 scope, and now Arken runs consistently 25% off MSRP. So we're selling it for $300 for this particular scope. So if you're going out to a Chinese OEM, I mean, we can probably safe to say it would be about $100 that, okay, or less, that they're paying for this. So what are they sacrificing, or what are we getting versus, let's say, a Vortex Venom, or let's say even like the Helix scopes? So I mean, from my take of it, so from our conversations, the components that I see going into it is you have the actual cost of components, so that would be the glass, the turret, the materials in there. You're going to have the design, you're going to have the labor, and then I would say you have the quality control. So it seems like, okay, we're checking off more of the feature set on this. So what are we sacrificing on, or what is lacking? I mean, it definitely seems like the QC, but
well, I mean, the QC is definitely lacking, because apparently half of this should not make it to the market. The design quality is getting there, not quite there yet, because a more experienced designer would do more fundamentals and specmanship. For example, EP5 looks amazing on paper, partly because the field of view looks amazing. Well, field of view is notoriously hard to combine with flare control. So if you have anything but perfect lighting, field of view is great and you can't see shit.
And the iBox is absolutely atrocious.
Same business. So getting a good iBox with wide field of view is hard, right? So what you usually do with budget scopes is that you try not to push field of view so much, because if you keep it moderate, reasonable, right, a lot of other things become simpler. But that means your specs are not going to look as good, and you're actually going to have to market it. Arken's business model seems to be very nice to YouTube influencers, and since 90% of them can tell they asked from an elbow anyway, they'll say anything.
Well, I would say they used to be very nice to influencers, not so much anymore, because and this is actually this is one of the topics. So when Arken came out, when they had their affiliate program, so for every YouTuber who pushed an Arken and used their link, the YouTuber got a 25% affiliate commission for every scope that they sold. So some people out there were making a very high monthly income with the scopes. Then they knocked it down to, I believe, like 15% commission, which, in full disclosure, which was what I was on. I didn't have that many sales. And then what they did was, if they were running a coupon, so for example, if we did a video, somebody clicks on a link, you go to the website, but you're buying the item and Arken is running their sale, then you don't get any affiliate commission. And I know that has pissed off quite a few of the YouTubers. And now basically Arken, you can go on any single day of the week and these scopes have a Arken coupon on them. And basically, even if you're led there by a website or an affiliate, they don't get anything out of it. So that's why a lot of them just basically stopped doing stuff with it. But because Arken has just become basically so big within our micro community, if they have a new product, you're going to make up the money on the views, like, because people will be searching for it. I mean, that's why I'm like, okay, fine. You know what though? Let me have the opportunity. If I have the opportunity to have it, let me do a video on it, because it will bring people to the channel. But that's basically one of the relationships that has changed there. Now, I don't know if that's like that for every single content creator, but for the ones that I know, if there's a coupon or Arken is running a sale, you're not getting any affiliate commission or anything else from them at all.
So, I mean, I don't do a ton of affiliate stuff.
Yeah.
I have affiliate accounts with like Brownells, Optic, etc. And I like that because, they sell a million different brands. I think I have a few individual affiliate accounts, but once again, I don't use them that much. That's why I have a subscription website, and I prefer to be. My loyalty is pretty much only to my audience. Everybody else can go.
Exactly.
I mean that's my quote unquote business model in this case, right? So,
and that's what people appreciate about you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see how it goes further out, but I don't care hugely about affiliate sales. I never signed up to Arken. I had no idea what the terms are, for the same reason, and I never really issued a full review of an Arken. Is that I don't know what to say if I do not have any faith in the consistency of the product.
Yeah,
that's basically that. And if I do a review on a scope and say, okay, this one is good, I haven't the foggiest fucking idea how the rest of them are, that's not very helpful.
Yeah. Right. Well, I know this is kind of like in the past when we had conversations about it. So oftentimes, especially like when it comes to getting review products, in the vast majority of the cases, it's literally just one off of the shelf. I know in the past when I started out, so for example, me and you, we've discussed primary optics, where the ones that were sent out for reviewers were double checked over by the head of engineering for primary arms. And then there's one other company that has checked off a gun, and one other company that checked off an optic, which was Sightmark. So the very first ones that I did, and they were checked off by a product person to make sure that the sample we're getting is looked over. And there have been times, so for example, like with the SIG Sierra 6 BDX system, I get the scope 2 days before I plan on filming with it, and the scope is dead on arrival. I'm like, okay. So on one hand, it's nice to know that somebody has looked over that sample, but it almost seems like there are companies that do have inconsistent product. They will possibly get a good one to send to you, versus on the other hand, it's like I'd almost like feel better getting a random product sample. But then at the same time, it's okay. For example, like, is that SIG that I got, is that representative of all of them? I will say they overnighted me a brand new one, which is pretty cool, and that one actually worked fine. But it's tough, and I'm not sure if there's a right or wrong answer to that, because, well, would you rather have something that's cherry picked or run of the mill? And if you have something that's go ahead.
So here's the gist of it, right? I don't want something cherry picked, and if I catch a company cherry picking something, all hell's gonna break loose. And I've done that. I also don't want a dud. I don't mind if they look at it, but I don't want them to look at 20 and pick me the best one.
Okay.
Hell, with Vortex, when I got my Razer Gen 3, I actually made them put it on the MTF machine and run it, and I looked at the curves to know that it's mid pack. Okay.
Nice.
Because I'm friendly with Vortex, and I had an opportunity to do so, right? So I know my Gen 3, which I like very much, is a mid-pack scope. It's not cherry-picked, but it's not a bad one either. And to be fair, the range on the Gen 3s is not very large. They're pretty consistent.
Okay.
With
Interesting.
Primary Arms, I actually went and visited them. So I'm pretty, with the chief engineer talking about Bert, I'm pretty friendly with him. He's a good dude. He's not cherry-picking his scopes. He's making sure that he's making sure that somebody looked at it and they're not sending out crap.
Correct.
And
And
Primary
that's
Arms
definitely
is
good.
pretty consistent overall, so
Yeah.
they've really stepped up. So,
That's definitely good to know, because I mean, like, and especially it's like, I know, for example, like when it comes to firearms, I know even like the major companies, they literally just send. What they do is you talk to the person, they put the order in through the system, and it gets fulfilled just like any other gun. With the exception of one company where, so for example, like Palmetto State Armory, the review stuff from them. So if I buy it myself, I don't even bother letting them know. So basically, the way it works with Palmetto State Armory, if it's a brand new product, they're only going to have one or two available for the media pool. So I don't even bother asking for those. So for example, last one was the PSA Dagger. I just bought it myself. However, the other stuff, for example, I had a 12.5-inch 6.5 Grundle upper that I asked them that they sent me. Same thing with one of the AKs, and both of those, they did get, so it was fulfilled by the shipment, but then Josiah, who handles the marketing and public relations, he looked over it himself and just basically checked off that it was kosher, like the product was fine. But definitely, I don't think it was like a cherry-picked item or anything else along those lines. But like I said, but when it comes to optics, I mean, I was literally a little bit surprised. So my very first optic, it was checked over, and I had a full 3-page thing done by Sightmark on their 6-25, 6-24 PRS scope, and 6.5 to 25 PRS scope. And I just assumed that all of them were like that. And then I get like scopes that are dead on arrival from SIG. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's not the norm. And almost like sometimes if I am getting ready to film with the product, I'd almost rather wish that somebody bothered to check it over. But then the question is, okay, well, what percentage of scopes that are going out to people are actually checked over? And when I was having a conversation with one of the guys from SIG Electro Optics, so here we are talking about a $2,000 SIG Sierra 3 and Sierra 6 solution, an expensive scope. And they're like, oh yeah, we QC, we do some QC at the manufacturer, and then when they get here, we might QC less than 1% of them. I'm like, okay. It's like I'm not sure if it gives me like that good fuzzy warm feeling that a $2,000 or $3,000 scope is not looked over by a human.
Well, so for the couple of companies we just mentioned, for example, Vortex, every single Razer scope is looked over when it comes from the OEM. For some of them, they also pop the different turrets on, do a couple other things, etc. With the Filipino stuff, I think they spot checked 1 out of every 10. With the Chinese, where the volumes are really crazy, also spot checked 1 out of every 20. I don't know what the exact ratio is, etc. But every Razer, for example, every single one gets checked. Primary Arms checks every single scope that comes, no matter whether it's a $100 scope or $2,000 scope. Every single one. It's not necessarily tested very rigorously, but somebody opens the box, pulls it out, twists stuff, looks at it, etc. If nothing obviously crappy is apparent, to pop it back in the box and it goes to the warehouse. Okay. So that's an interesting one. Look, I need to go take a phone call real quick.
Go ahead.
I will mute myself and I'll rejoin. Give me 5 minutes, okay?
Perfect. All right. So actually, no. So I'm going to, at the same time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through the comments. Once again, if you want to help support the channel, send a super chat, become a channel member. All right. So basically, that's the SH4J. So the sample that I have here is a pretty nice scope. And I think for the money, it's a really, really good value. But once again, let's put it this way, like if you're going to be shooting inside 100 to 2 to 300 yards, it's not a bad scope, but I wouldn't necessarily depend on it. So the other one is the Arken EPL4, and I'll save that one for when Ilya comes back, because I know he'll have a couple other different competitors on there. And we're definitely going to ask him on the Ares. So the Ares ETR is actually a fantastic scope, but you are comparing an ETR, which is like $1,000 scope, to an EP5, which is half the price. Now the Helos, I am absolutely not familiar with. Yeah, so I mean, the one thing, and it's already, we started mentioning it, is the eye box and the eye design. So I'm going to ask Ilya to talk about it a little bit when he comes back. But it all really correlates down to the eyepiece design and the eye box on the Arkens. So if you ask me kind of like, okay, what's the problems with the Arkens? Eye relief is less than other scopes, and the eye box, so basically when you have it, like how much can you actually move? At 6 power, it's not bad. Once you start cracking up the magnification, even at 25 power, you better be in that same spot holding it, because if you just move it slightly, your field of view is going to be cut significantly, and everything starts going blah. And the SH4 is, because it's a 50 millimeter front objective instead of a 56, it is actually going to be quite a bit more forgiving. The EP5, it is probably one of the worst eye boxes that I have seen on any scope, bar none. So that's definitely I think the Venom was actually quite a bit better, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Element does with the Titan, because the Element Titan is, I mean, it's a little bit sharper. The turrets, I think, feel a little bit nicer. I like the reticle on there quite a bit more. Comes down to the reticle. I like the APR S6. That's the Affluent one? And again, I apologize for no 1022 day. So in full disclosure, I was feeling quite a bit under the weather the past couple of days. So yesterday I almost like slept in the entire day. My middle daughter, she was like sick. It almost like feels like possibly the but since I'm like so like I just felt a little bit blah. So I honestly I didn't even realize today was 1022, and I was like, okay, well, it's like earlier in the day I was like I'd rather be in bed, but like I've actually gotten quite a bit better. And I will say, so for those that are just coming on, I shared it on the last live stream, but I went to the doctors. I had otis media, so inflammation between the ear, that eustachian tube from the back of the nose between the ears, had inflammation. So not a full-blown infection, but it's been bothering me for 5 or 6 months. They gave me, they put me, well, he didn't put me on antibiotics. He told me go get allergy meds, and I've been on them for about 2 weeks now, and actually feeling quite a bit better. So it's that. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so the audio we did fix. It's this stupid thing. I don't know why it is not working. I apologize for that. And so the reason why the audio was bad was because it was just picking up directly through this, even though the battery was dead, so there's no amplification or anything else along those lines. Nice. Okay. Now we're getting to the actual questions. They really should have done an F3 to 18, 4 to 20 for the EPL4. Very true. So the EPL4, their entire premise with this, so it's definitely going to be in the video. And I did get through the scope footage on these, so you're going to love it. I upgraded the video quality. Thank you, SideShot Scope Cam. The EPL4 is a product that I'm kind of like, okay, well, did they actually make this because they wanted to, or did they feel like they had to? So the EPL4 is their EP Lite, or they made it, they wanted to do the image quality of the Arken EP5 or extreme precision, down to this for the lightweight hunting scope. So these are available in two types. They have the 4 to 16 and 6 to 24. This is the one that I got, the 6 to 24 by 50. And they're able to save weight. So this is 25 ounces versus one of these is 36 ounces. So look at that. For next time, I will actually turn the camera. So here, we'll do it this way. So you still have the same turret design. You do have 8 mils of adjustment per rotation. Definitely sounds the same. But I will say, because it's a smaller size, so you can actually see like physically the size difference between these two. So you have 8 on one and 8 on the other. So the clicks in between each one are going to be quite a bit less. So it's easier to overrun them, which it's like, so for example, like the Helix has 6 mils per rotation. I will say this is an inconsistent thing. Oh, so actually the other inconsistent thing with the SH4J, so on the website, it basically says that it parallaxes down to 25 yards, but on the scope, you have markings down to 20. So that's just like, okay, well, it actually does or not. So this one, you do have the same thing. You have illuminated reticle. I do like the fact that it's on off in between each one. I definitely don't like that it's super stiff. Parallax adjustment is going to be nice and smooth on this, which I definitely do appreciate. Now, the one thing that they did different is the windage is actually going to be capped. So I removed the cap. I have it upstairs, but the windage is not going to be exposed. It does screw on, but your windage, it's not as tactile. It's not as audible, but it's still going to be pretty nice. So the core of what I feel makes an Arken is still going to be here, but it's just basically shrunk down. The problem comes in is that, it's okay, we're used to, like, for example, the SH4 Gen 2s, 32 mils of internal elevation adjustment, 10 mils of windage. Windage is not a big deal because in order to use 12 mils of windage, you need to be shooting in a freaking thunderstorm at 1,000 yards. Most people are not going to be doing that. So with this one, they have 12 mils of windage adjustment, but the elevation on this is only 20 mils, so consistent with other 30 millimeter scopes. So in order to get the weight down, one of the things that they did with the EPL4 is they went from the checkbox, from the feature box checking SH4s and EP5s to now they went down to a 30 millimeter tube, and you're sacrificing a lot of internal elevation adjustments. So now you only have 20 on here. So 20 mils of internal elevation adjustment pretty much makes this average for this price point. So the one that I definitely instantly thought of comparing this to was the Element Helix. So the Helix, so it's interesting. Actually, I'm going to bring Ilya back on here. So Ilya, have you looked at the EPL4? You're familiar with it or no?
I've seen it once, but I'm not hugely familiar with it.
So the EPL4, basically same nice feeling turret, but it's 8 mils.
I know what it is, yeah.
Yeah. So 20 mil. So instantly when I looked at the scope, I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't seem to have like the feature box checking wizardry of the SH4 or the EP5. And I'm like, okay, well, why would you have this versus the Helix. And now it looks like the Helix is going to be roughly at the same price point. Now, let's say the image quality on this, so it still uses Japanese ED glass. And the image quality is pretty good, but you have mediocre iBox. And this one, so what's interesting is when they came out with these, we were like, okay, this is going to be for the hunters. And it only came out being available with a regular clean reticle. And then this one is a mill tree reticle, the same reticle as the other. So I guess it's no longer just for hunters. And
hunters use tree reticles also. You're looking at one.
Well, out west, you guys are weird. But if we call it the precision
Is there
rifle,
is there any other kind of hunting?
you know, like when the big quake happens, you're in that zone where your states are going to be decimated, and we're going to be okay here on the East Coast.
Yeah, when the big quake happens, California is going to go down the drains. Republicans will have a majority, and my house will be on the beach.
Yes. Well, not the big quake in California. I'm talking about the super volcano that
Yosemite.
Yeah, that one.
I don't know what that one is going to do. I'm on the eastern side of the continental divide, actually. So
Okay, nice. Oh yeah, you're in New Mexico. You're New Mexico, not Arizona.
Yes.
You still have the problem with illegals.
Not as big of a problem as in Arizona or Texas. So illegals cross into New Mexico and then go straight to Texas. Texas started building a barbed wire fence on the border with New Mexico.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So EPL4, I'm thinking instantly, why would you get this instead of getting a Helix? So now the Helix is available in both first and second focal plane. It's available with clean and dirty reticles. And it seems like the product consistency is much more consistent on there. Image quality, I haven't looked back to back with both. I would say it's probably close, but the reticle design, I like it more on the Helix. And also, I definitely am a fan of the bigger eye box and the bigger eye relief on that scope.
So EPL4, is it illuminated or not?
It is illuminated, but same thing, just the crosshair, just the center crosshair.
Yeah, that's actually the right way of doing it. So Helix is not illuminated. If you need illumination, that's pretty much the only reason to get the EPL4. But if you hunt with that, illumination can actually become important.
Yeah.
I actually have a Helix FFP somewhere here, and I like it quite a lot. It's a well-made scope, and they've been making it for a while, so we know the consistency is pretty good. What really helps the Helix FFP is that it is the same OEM and same basic design on the inside as the Vortex Diamondback Tactical.
Okay.
They're same 4-16 and 6-24 models, etc. You know, some of the external features, some other things are a little bit different on the Helix, and if memory serves me right, Element holds the OEM to a slightly tighter turret tracking scope. Okay. But if you're looking for a variable scope in a budget, and if you can live without illumination, Helix is a spectacular option.
Yeah.
First was SFP, then FFP came over. I have the FFP one, and I've looked at quite a few of them. And I also like that because it's one of the scopes at some point I added to my recommendations. I also keep tabs on how they hold up. And I simply do not hear about many problems with them. I think I've heard of 2 in the time I've been paying attention.
Is it also possibly because the sample size in the Helix is going to be significantly less? I mean, obviously, when we're comparing price points, Helix was competing with the SH4 and the EP5. But now that I think it looks like we're possibly going to be dropping it a little bit, and if you have a more direct comparison, that's going to be with this guy. So the Helix is a couple of ounces heavier, but it just seems like it's a more well-rounded scope. And if you're a true hunter, so Helix Element came out with the Helix HD and the Helix HD long range.
So HD and HDLR are completely different scopes.
Yeah.
Also called Helix, but completely different scopes. Second focal plane, 2-16 variation, etc. I'm talking about front focal plane Helixes.
Yeah. Well, so in full disclosure, I did. So one of my Helix HDs, the long range one, that with the BDC reticle, that one I did need to send back to them because that one did have parallax issues past 800 yards.
There we go. So past 800? That's not common. Did you get the eyepiece adjusted correctly? Okay. Usually, if you start having
Actually, sorry,
parallax issues,
it's actually like it's closer to 5 now that I think about it.
okay, yeah, 5 is okay. 5 is okay. So if you start seeing parallax issues, it's usually a little bit closer. H800, that would not be common.
Yeah.
Once again, so HDLR is a newer model. I
Yep.
don't know the track record on it. I am fairly well familiar with the track record on the scopes, the front focal plate 4 to 16 and 6 to 24. And for the 3 brands that I know of that use those 2 designs, which is Vortex, Swamp Fox, and Element, the return rates have been very low.
Yeah.
Okay. So the scope basically holds up. It's not very feature rich. If I remember correctly, it has 6 milliradian per turn turrets.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does is that the feel is not amazing because it's on the 6 milliradian per turn, the clicks are fairly widely spaced. And if you have a budget scope, that's how you get good click feel, right?
Yeah.
Keep them widely spaced. There is no illumination. They didn't do anything crazy in the field of view, but the scope is easy to get behind. It's reasonably well corrected, and it just works.
Yep.
Okay. It was for many years the SWFA fixed power scopes, the 10 power fixed power scopes. That was it. It was not feature rich. It
The
was
Super
not
Sniper.
spiffy. Super SS, right? SWFA SS scopes. It was not super feature rich. It was not super modern. It had a visible reticle, and the damn thing worked. Every once in a while, there'd be a broken one, but it's they were statistically very low numbers. Yeah, you could go get back then some Arken equivalent, whatever. But if you wanted to shoot instead of fucking with the scope the whole data range, you got nice WFA. It's not as restricted as it used to be, but there are still scopes now that have had for a while that hold up. And one of the things I like about the Element Helix or Vortex Diamondback Tactical or Swamp Fox, I think the Patriot is a related model. They're not all identical, but they're very similar. The fact that I like about them is that they've been making them for at least 5 years now, right? At least some of them, 4 or 5 years, I think.
Which one, the SWF or Helix, or which one's
Helix, Vortex Diamondback Tactical, and Swamp Fox Patriot.
Helix? At least 4 years.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years. For 4 or 5 years, they've been making these scopes, and I'm not hearing about any widespread problems. So that means that the manufacturing has gone through multiple batches, multiple production runs, and all that, right? How do OEMs make rifle scopes? They do a production run of some fairly, depending on the company, but often comparatively significant number of scopes. Can be hundreds, can be thousands, right? They kit up the parts and do a production run and spit it out. Then the factory switches and does something else, a production run on some other model, right? And then they, when they go back at some point to the decision to do another production. So if it's been out for 5 years, there have been several production runs, and I'm not seeing any sort of a huge difference. I'm not seeing anything that required frequent repair. I'm not seeing any. There's no time slot I can think of. Then all of a sudden, I heard about Helixes or Diamondback Tacticals all coming back. There have been a few sporadically, but not that many. And Vortex sells a shit ton of scopes.
Oh yeah,
a ridiculous number, right? And with Vortex, actually, know the return rates, right? And they're low. It's been absolutely robust scope. Not the world beater, not the spiffiest, not the newest, not the most marketing friendly, but the damn thing just works.
Now, here's a question for you. The return rate. So obviously you don't disclose the specific numbers, but would you say there's a difference between the return rates of your, let's say, your Diamondback or lower entry level scope that's going to go on a bunch of guns versus a more capable scope? So let's say, for example, your Element Titans or your Athlon Ares, the ETRs, the BTRs, all of those type of scopes, and going up market beyond that, which are going to be purchased by people who know they need those specific features.
Yeah. So with the different layers of Chinese scopes, it's hard for me to say for sure. Between Helix and Titan, I'm not convinced there's a big difference.
Well, so let me rephrase it. If it's the people themselves who are going to be returning it, so whether or not necessarily like just whether people are returning them rather than there's something physically wrong with the scopes. So for example, like if you're a newer shooter and you're buying a cheaper scope, odds are you
Okay.
might not know that there's an issue with it
So
unless
do I
it's
look
something
frozen
blatant.
to you, or is it just
You
me?
are a little bit frozen, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Guys, let us know which of us is frozen.
Yeah, I'm moving right now, and right now I don't see myself moving, so something is frozen. It's kind of an interesting pose to be frozen in.
Yeah, the audio is fine. The audio is coming in
Yeah,
fine.
okay.
So it's
That's okay.
somebody's
Audio in
video.
this case is more important. Audio in this
Yes.
case is more important. Hopefully, I'll unfreeze eventually. But usually, the more expensive scopes typically have lower return rates, but it's not always true because oftentimes, let's say Chinese scopes, when you go to higher price ranges, you're getting more feature-rich scopes and more complicated designs, right? So technically, QC assembly is a little bit better, but these are also harder scopes to make. Once you take that, okay, I'm still frozen. I'm gonna stop my video and then start again.
Okay.
Because maybe it's on my side. Interesting. I re-enabled
Guys,
the video.
let us know in the comments which one of us is frozen. I'm not sure it's me.
Well, in my screen, it looks like me.
Okay.
Okay. I'll just keep talking in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Once you go up to the more expensive stuff, the return rates are lower, right? For high quality Japanese stuff, for example, the return rates are quite low. Once you get to these good quality Japanese scopes, $1,500 to $2,000 range. Okay, so God Taught Me sort of says it's just me that's frozen.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, let me see something. Okay, it's problems on my end, and I know why. Hold on, I'll fix it in a moment. I'll mute myself.
Okay, no problem. Oh no, I'm all here by myself with the Arken EPL4. Make sure you click for our affiliate links. All right. I'm definitely looking forward to. Oh, and then actually, speaking of, we were still going to get to this. I literally just took this scope off of my gun, and this ring. My Sony battery up there is dead. I will change the battery on there. But this ring right here cracked from the base. Nice. Okay. All right. So admit it. Which one of you owns Arken? And are you happy with it? And what's the distance that you're shooting them out at? There we go. You're no longer frozen, sir.
Should be better now.
You're good.
Excellent. So, what was I saying?
The return rates on the higher ones is significantly
once you
lower.
get to basically 1,500-ish or thereabouts Japanese scopes, unless there's a particular bad production run, which is not common, but it can happen. The return rates for light optics or Kenko stuff, etc., it gets pretty low and doesn't really get much lower up from there, because you can't fall out of the basement by just getting into statistics of production. One of the things you want to keep in mind also is that for higher end scopes, so conservatively speaking, 90% of the scopes that are returned, there's nothing wrong with the scope.
Yeah.
Okay. I might be lowballing it. Because
90 is actually low.
Yeah. Vast majority of those scopes that are returned, there's nothing wrong with them. I've had a chance to go and sit with the customer service guys at a couple of companies and go look at stuff and look what they do to them to try to induce whatever is the reported error and all that. Out of the ones that are actual that they send in, half the time, it's in the Indian, not the arrow. And
now,
of the ones.
Is this across the board, or is this for
it's
higher
for a few
end?
brands that I'm talking about higher end stuff.
Okay.
Because I never really tried to go and dig deep into why the lower end scopes get returned. But with lower end scopes, there are some obvious problems, like parallax doesn't work. All of a sudden, something went loose inside. Shake the scope, something moves inside. But, I've seen things like that. I'm talking, but when they get a scope, and most of the scopes that get returned are not returned for catastrophic errors. Some guy comes over, oh my God, I went shooting, my scope shifted 0 by 68,000 milliradian, and that's why I missed the biggest buck I've ever seen in the adjacent 17 counties, right? So something like that. Or I went to a match and everything went to shit. Half the time, it's people are just can't admit that they fucked up. Okay. Fuck me, hold on.
Phone call. Okay. Let's see. Do I actually have my battery?
Sorry about that.
You're good.
Half the time, people can't admit that they've screwed up. Of when they have a legitimate concern, maybe 3/4 of the time, the problems with the mount. The reason I've been talking about mounts so often lately is that people do the most counterintuitive to me things with mounts. Right? I remember I was visiting a scope manufacturer, and they showed me some guy sent in a fairly nice scope that was sitting on a rimfire, and the scope kept on the point of impact kept on drifting sideways. He kept on shooting, kept on drifting sideways. Said, okay. Calculated how much it has drifted. It was some ridiculous number, well beyond the adjustment range of the scope.
Nice.
Right, and sent it in, says something's wrong with the scope. Well, okay, if it has drifted by well beyond the adjustment range of the scope, it ain't the scope. Right, there's not that much adjustment range inside it. So after a bunch of digging, and I was there when the customer service called the customer, just trying to get more details. So he put it in the American rifle company's Embrace mount.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace mount has this one long monolithic clamp.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, on some rails, with some mounts, if the stars align just right, if you torque it in the wrong sequence, starting on one side and torque it all the way and start the others, what's going to happen is that as you shoot, this thing is going to be drifting for a couple of months until eventually it settles. That could be a significant amount of drift.
Wow.
Okay. And these things happen all the time because people don't understand how to mount scopes. Some go far more tight on the rings. I've seen scopes come in with squashed tubes. Some don't know how to tighten the cross slots. Others, I mean, it's the cookiest shit.
Yeah.
Others are convinced that the rings shouldn't be tightened too much, but needed to be pushed up against the turret saddle, right? And then its turret saddle bumps into the ring with every piece, with every recoil cycle. Like, and where all these idiotic theories come from, I haven't the fuckiest foggy idea. I have no clue. But somebody comes up with this bullshit. It drives people like me up the wall, right? You don't need to know anything about scopes or mounts to sit and look at it for a couple of minutes and go, maybe this is fucking stupid, right? But this amount of self-reflection apparently is not common within the shooting community.
No, I don't think so.
Offended the entirety of your audience, but
No.
mine. But it's the truth, right? I see this all the time.
Well, I would say the vast majority of the gun owners are not going to go on YouTube. We're not going to go on a live stream and actually ask detailed questions about for mounts. So I would say the audiences that we have tuning in, they're actually interested in this topic, and they might not have all of the information yet, but at least they're willing to learn and they're open-minded enough about it to start asking questions. Well, why does this work? How does this work? Why is it important to me? So I don't think anyone's basically been affected. I think like everyone's learning, and especially now that I would say technology is improving, manufacturing is improving, and we're able to get products at more competitive price points. And it's just basically some parts that sometimes manufacturers cut corners. So speaking of mounts, I didn't think I would ever have issues with it. So I'm taking off the scope off of my gun, and this ring separated right from here. It cracked right along the bottom edge on my Arken,
which ring is it?
the Arken rings.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen them. I've never used them, so I'm not sure how they.
And I didn't have issues beforehand, but basically right along the bottom where the bottom of the ring goes into the base, you just sheared straight along the bottom of it.
All right.
And I didn't over tighten it or anything. I always use a torque limiter. Yeah, that's just weird.
Yeah, that shit happens. Like I said, I wouldn't read too much into one broken ring. I have not heard of these breaking very much.
Yeah. No, I haven't had any issues with them in the past. I guess basically sometimes the material just goes bad and shit happens.
Yeah, shit can happen. That's just shit can
Well, apparently even with more expensive mounts, that type of stuff happens as well.
I've seen everything can be screwed up by the right user, no matter how expensive.
Okay.
All right, so I will say that. I'm not saying that you screwed up this particular ring, although it is possible. But who knows? To go back to the question of the audience, right? Because I spent some time thinking about it. I have a comparatively limited audience, and I'm very fond of the audience I have. The reason, the approach that I'm trying to foster is to not only ask what to get, what to buy, but also ask why. The why is really important, because there is no possible way for me to sit here and go over every possible scenario. The methods, the way to think about it, the way to approach it, the way to solve these problems, they matter. And that's the why. If you understand the why we do things a certain way, then chances are if something happens in the field, you'll be able to resolve it on the fly.
Yeah. Interesting. So there's a question. So Chris, Clovertech, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the super chat. Definitely goes a long way towards getting more batteries. So there's one question, and we're going to get to the newer one. So there's a question that the people had about the SH4s and the EPLs versus the equivalent scopes within the Athlon line. So there's the Ares and so the Ares and the Helos. I have played with some of the Ares scopes, which I know basically it's a higher end scope than the Arken EP5s and SH4s. Where does the Helos basically fit in? And do you believe that you're trading almost, let's say, for example, features for quality control going Athlon versus Arken?
So Athlon's actually, Helos is very feature rich. I don't think you're giving anything up in terms of features. But you're getting better quality control. I've seen a couple of Helos scopes. The 2 to 12 by 42 is one of my favorites. Really, really nice scope, and a bunch of guys in Alaska using them for hunting. So, and they're holding up to pretty rough use. There's a good number of them. They're good scopes. You're basically getting a better QC, probably better assembly quality, which makes a big difference. Because Athlon is using a pretty large and experienced OEM.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly who Arken uses for an OEM. I know they switched an OEM at some point. I know who they used to use.
Yeah, so they used to use Discovery, and then now they use somebody else. But all at the same time, they always swore at their meetings that like they control or they have their own OEM, which I don't think you'd buy that.
I do not believe that to be true.
Okay.
So when there are several reasons, right? So generally speaking, a European company cannot own the majority of a Chinese company. It's illegal.
Correct. It has to be a joint venture partnership.
It has to be a joint venture with the majority owned by a Chinese company. That's one. Two, every time I dig a little bit when somebody makes that claim, and I did not dig into the Arken's claim, right?
Yeah.
So anything is possible. Every time I dig into somebody making that claim, that means that they control one production line at the facility and it just works for them. It doesn't mean they own the facility. It doesn't mean they control it. It doesn't mean they have anything to do with who works there with the quality control, anything like that. Unless they've got people on the ground, then none of this matters.
Okay. So speaking of scope quality, and one of the questions that I basically had for you, is it, so for example, I'm assuming a larger company like Athlon or Vortex, they might use an OEM, but they're going to have their own people on site, or they're going to hire a QC company that's going to be checking a lot of these scopes, spot checking a lot of these scopes on site. With these smaller, I would say, startups, so even let's say, for example, like, okay, let's use both. We can use Arken, and let's say, for example, we use a Maven or a Tract or an Apex. Do they still have that same capability of QCing the scopes before they even leave the factory? And would an OEM kind of take advantage of that they're not there on their butt?
You ask a good question. Let me think about the right.
So I think that, and the reason why I basically bring that up is even so, for example, like people often ask me about a lot of the Turkish firearms that are coming into the country. So through some of the things that I do, I also work with a bunch of Eastern European content creators, and they use a lot of so their markets are saturated by a lot of the Turkish firearms. And some of them, I mean, there's videos of those Turkish guns basically blowing up there. And in one interview by major Russian gun tuber who also owns his chains of retail stores there, and in a Russian interview, and they have subtitles, so if anybody wants to watch it, it's really interesting. They basically, so the first guns that they're bringing into the country, so the way that Turkey was, so Turkey set up these gun enterprise zones because so Turkey, the government of Turkey, they wanted to compete more and go back to their roots as a firearms manufacturer. So they basically established these zones where you have so many of those Turkish gun companies where they don't pay any taxes, they get a lot of government subsidies. And with a lot of them, their entire goal is let's produce as much as we can. So they started just basically dumping out as many guns as possible. So in that interview, he was like, okay, we started seeing the guns that are coming in, rifles and shotguns. They're like half of them had bores that were not concentric. There were massive issues with them. And we're like, these OEMs, they were taking advantage of us. So now we have our own employees at the production site. We pay them full time that they're there QCing every single one of them. And he was like, in the beginning, we were rejecting 50% of them. Now that the OEM kind of like bought in that we're not going to be taken advantage of, they're rejecting about 10%, but it's one company. And then if the same OEM for others, they are basically just putting through anything they can. So Turkish handguns in the United States, the first ones that started coming in were like really, really bad. But then I know for example, one importer in the United States, they ran into those issues too. So once again, they have their own people on site full time, QCing every single one of them before it ever comes here to make sure that they don't get taken advantage of. From the metallurgy perspective, everything that actually works fine, because they didn't care. And then from the optics world, so one company I talked to, their basically plan was, so they were an OEM for another company, and now they decided to basically start doing their own stuff. And their plan was, because so they check all the scopes. So their plan was for the United States, we're going to send them the best of the best that are going to have tracking errors under 5%. The stuff that's between 5 to 10% is going to go to Europe, and the stuff that has more than 10% tracking error is going to get sold to the Asian markets because they don't care. So I'm just like dumbfounded about it. And almost like, so when people are asking about, let's say, these type of scopes, or even let's say, for example, we both have a high opinion of Element, but Element Element, Arken, Tract, Maven, Apex, they obviously don't have the resources of an Athlon or a Vortex or a SIG. So are they potentially running into those QC issues there as well?
Oh, anything is possible. So there are different ways to deal with this, and I've seen companies do it in a variety of different ways. Element Guy is actually fairly involved with their OEMs. No, one of them is in Asia visiting OEM right now, spending some time there. So depends on how and where you do QC. A lot of optics OEMs, established ones now, they do their own QC and they're pretty particular about it. The Chinese want to compete and they want repeat business. Right? It's no longer sell you something, don't care what happens tomorrow.
Okay.
A lot of the Chinese OEMs are competing against each other, and they do not want to have issues. They want to continue selling the scope. For example, Vortex probably has people on site, but somebody with the volume of Vortex really doesn't have to, right?
Okay.
Because if Vortex has insane volumes, and if you send a batch to Vortex that doesn't work, and Vortex decided they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore, 60% of your production capacity is now idling, right? So Chinese OEMs have gotten a lot more mature. Most of them. Not all, but most of them. Another way to control a lot of this is that if you are an optics company, you can make a contract with these with the OEM in a variety of different ways. One of them is if you have your own capability of doing QC, you start batch checking scopes. If you take a batch and from that particular batch of one pallet of scopes, some number of them you check and they are faulty, you take that whole pallet and send it back and they don't get paid for it.
Okay.
That tends to motivate OEMs to be somewhat more careful. Right? There are different ways of playing it, and companies who are savvy enough, they learn to do two things. One, to work with the right OEMs, and two, to keep an eye on them. Okay. But for example, if you go to some small OEM that's not really well established, and your biggest advantage is a low price, well, quality control and assembly quality are going to be the first two things that are sacrificed.
So then, kind of going back to the question of are you taking more of a gamble by going, let's say, non-Vortex or non-Athlon?
It depends on the company, right? With Element, for example, it's not that much of a gamble because they really pay attention.
Okay.
Right. With Arken, I don't have any inside knowledge, but based on the fact that half of the ones you've seen are
inconsistent or had issues,
right? They're probably not paying as much attention as they should, and I'm sure they're looking to change that. All reasonable companies try to do that. Athlon has super strong ties with the OEMs, right?
Okay.
The Athlon president, Kevin Ku, he spends a lot of time. He's originally from China, right? So he spends a lot of time in China. And when he was at Bushnell, I think his job was working with the OEMs. He has very strong ties with them. So Athlon generally, for the most part, maintains pretty good quality control, but I've seen batches that were not great. But for the most part, Athlon is good. Swamp Fox, another brand I generally like, they are a house brand of an OEM.
Okay.
Guess what happens if the factory sends a batch of shitty product to Swamp Fox? Right? Citron is a house brand of a Japanese OEM.
Oh, okay.
I'm not hugely excited about how they make some of the decisions on features and all that, but like they don't need to go through 8 layers of bureaucracy to dig down to who fucked up. Right, same company.
Okay.
Vortex is so huge that like everybody.
It'd be stupid to screw.
If you're working with Vortex and you did something stupid enough to lose their business, then
it's game over for you.
They will basically, whoever is in charge of that particular shop in China, they will take you behind the shed and quietly shoot you with an unsuppressed 28 caliber bullet. It's okay.
Yep. So here's a question for you. Actually, there's two questions for you. Let me go for the first one. And this is apparently from things you've said. Ilya, for the 5-42, you said March designed that optic around the center of the glass and distortions were visible in the bottom of the reticle. Did image degrade significantly dialing 25 mils plus?
Not too bad actually. So March does objectives really, really well. And once I go off center, the image degradation is due to potential issues with the objective. With the March, so the edges, they're not heavily distorted. They're not as sharp as the center, but they're still pretty decent. So, and as you dial, it maintains image quality reasonable. If you get very close to the edge of adjustment range, it does get worse. But otherwise, it's pretty well controlled. Not as good as some like Tangent, better than most.
Okay, but it seems like the March scopes, I mean, they're catered for a particular market, which is going to be like a lot of your ELR guys, or is it just they're not that popular in the United States?
And March is very small. It's a
Okay.
small company, small, very high-end company. The original market was more like Bencher, SF class, that kind of stuff. That have expanded a few other things, and they make very absolutely tier one stuff. But they do it a little bit differently. Their stuff is a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, most of it. They've gone to higher reactor ratios pretty early. They do diffraction limited objectives. They do a lot of things in a very clever way. But they're just not a big manufacturer.
Yeah. So speaking of tier one, Dark Lord, Vortex says Venom is for recreation. Do you think it's a toy or a tool?
I don't know how to. Like, here's a catch, right? So if I get a stupid question, I'm always very tempted to give a stupid answer, right?
But apparently
everything
this comes to us from
yeah.
Vortex marketing material. So I guess on one hand, oh, go ahead. Let's hear your thoughts on this.
Look, I mean, everything that we do is recreation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's
until
not
the zombies come.
Yeah.
Or you go hunting.
Yeah, that's also recreation. Like if I don't shoot an animal, I'm not going to starve to death.
Unless that animal's out to kill you, and then it's self-defense.
And then the money is still on me. But regardless, Venom is a good scope.
Yeah.
For the money, one of the better ones. When Vortex just introduced the Venom, I was very surprised. It was only $100 less than Strike Eagle, right? And I'm like, okay, Strike Eagle has wider field of view and has illumination and locking turrets. Venom doesn't have those. It's only $100 difference, and I went and looked. If you can live without illumination, I actually like the Venom a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's easier to get behind. Field of view is still not narrow, though it's a little bit narrow. It's just a very well worked out scope.
Yeah, actually, for me, I was personally a fan of the color renditions on the Venom, especially versus the Arkens on them. Like, yeah, it wasn't like feature packed, but like I actually liked it. I mean, like it's not as sharp or tactile with the turrets. It doesn't have 32 mils of internal elevation adjustment, but it's just a very pleasant scope to work with. Very nice eye box, very nice. I mean, the field of view is going to be good enough on it, and it was just a joy to work with. And of course, it's backed by Vortex.
Yeah, it's optomechanically, unless I'm really misreading something, Venom is more or less the same thing as Swamp Fox, a Warhawk.
Yes, okay. I believe we're chatting about that.
Yeah, I think so. It looks that way to me. And if I remember correctly, Warhawk does it have? I think Warhawk does not have zero stop, but does have illumination. Venom has a zero stop. It's Vortex's own patent design. But it does not have illumination, if memory serves me right.
All right. So,
but those are well worked out scopes. They did a good job with them.
So here's a question then. Obviously, you've brought up that, okay, there's a lot of the products that get generated as an idea by an established American company, and they go out and they look for an OEM for the product. And then so for example, you're listening off to Venom, and it's like, oh, wow, this is a very similar scope to this product. And then you have, for example, like you have the Arken SH4 Gen 2, and then you can get a scope that almost is like identical, but it doesn't say Arken on it. So you have other products that are almost like very similar, and then you have like a lot of the Japanese scopes at the similar price point, which almost like feel like the same. I mean, they might have slightly different turret design, or they might have a different reticle. Well, all of them pretty much are going to have a different reticle. So it's basically like it's the chicken or the egg. Are these companies going out there? Like, does it make sense to go buy a Vortex when you can get that Swamp Fox for less?
Well, they're not
Possibly.
identical. Some features are
Okay.
different. It varies. Like SwarmFox is a pretty good company, so it's not a bad choice. But the reticle is going to be different. Turret's going to be different. One's illuminated, one's not, and you can look at both. The fact that it comes from the same OEM does not necessarily mean that the same quality control was enforced.
Okay.
And when it's not like in a situation with scopes like this, it's not like Vortex, came up with an idea of a scope like this and then went shopping for an OEM. No, it was an OEM design that happened to be within an OEM that Vortex already works with, very likely. And they said, "Oh, that's a pretty interesting model. I think we should give it a shot."
Okay.
Right? Something like that. So that's the more common flow. Some models are unique. Vortex does it's one of the higher end scopes. Some of the designers Vortex's own. They do have design capabilities, and some other manufacturers do as well, like Burris and a few others. But with Chinese OEM scopes, most of the time the OEMs develop something and then it gets finished off with the help, with the input from the manufacturer.
Okay.
Assuming we're talking about reputable brands that with reasonable customer support, just look at which reticle turret configuration appeals the most to you and get that.
Okay. Very good food for thought. So here's a question. It's like basically if somebody's shopping for a scope, let's say they know they'd want to go into, let's say, either long range hunting or they want to start dabbling past 300 to 400 yards. They want to go with the first focal plane type scope. What's your recommendation for somebody who is shopping for an optic? Should they basically get the most that they can for the money? Should they be shopping for a particular feature, or should they be saving up and not get a scope unless they have a $1,500 budget or something like that? And it's a question that a lot of people basically face themselves every single day. Like they hear advice. It's like, okay, well, we're talking about D-scopes, and like I say, yeah, it works, but you might not get one that actually works for you. And that's going to be red meat for people like, see, I told you should just get a Loophole Mark V or at least get an Athlon Kronos or something along those lines. But I mean, like we're going into a difficult economy, and people have a hard enough time getting a $500 or $600 rifle. So telling them to go from a $400 scope to a $1,500 scope, I mean, that's a sizable investment.
Yeah. Well, look, given how good many of these OEMs are becoming,
okay.
I mean, so if you want a lot of quality for the money, your best bang for the buck is in that $1,500 range, right? But if you can't swing it, you can't swing it.
Okay.
There are plenty of options available that are made well enough and are inexpensive enough. And we've been discussing some of them. We can try to rehash it, but it is the Element Helix and Element Titan. Titan is a little more expensive, right? So, but both are well under 1K. Athlon Helix BTR Gen 2, Athlon Eris scopes are quite good with Vortex. So we just talked about Venom and the different Strike Eagles. Like if you had wanted, for example, if you want a crossover, design that will do some hunting, some precision, some and stuff. A Strike Eagle 3-18 is a surprisingly nice scope. Surprised the hell out of me. I thought it was just a Me Too product, and I looked at it. It's very nice. All right. And then if you can't afford something nice, go look for it used. If you are looking for it used, make sure it's a company that will support your Vortex, etc. Right.
Okay.
Because
so right as you were saying it, so there was a comment, check the pawn shop, or basically shopping for a used scope.
Correct.
But would that actually be a recommendation for anybody? Would that be a recommendation for somebody who is competent to know? Or would that depend on the OEM that it's coming from? I guess basically whether they have a warranty or they're going to send you off packing.
If you are serious about this, you're going to spend time on it. If you're going to spend time on it, you'll figure out if something is wrong. If you have doubts of some sort, you will send it off to customer service with somebody like Vortex, somebody like or Burris or whoever, and they'll check the scope out. And if there is something off, They'll fix it or they'll just send you a new one. If you are not going to spend time on it, etc., then yeah, just go buy an Arken. It looks great hanging on the wall. Okay, or a variety of other Discovery and all those, right? I have a few Discovery scopes here, so I need to send them back. I'm sufficiently unhappy with them. I don't even want to give them away as free scopes during my live streams. Don't want them to be associated with me. And I have at the moment 1, 2, 3, I think 3 or 4 of them here.
Okay.
Just not worth it. Yeah, no, we have a mutual friend who sells them in Canada. Know that. More power to him.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
That's part of the reason why I never brought him on the channel myself.
Yeah. All right. So I wish him well. Sounds like they work there. Maybe they work better in colder temperature. I don't know. Just absolutely immature optical designs, immature mechanical designs. Again, they're going for it, etc. But they built a whole brand on selling to airsoft people in Malaysia or something.
Isn't that what this is?
I don't think it's Discovery anymore.
The SH4 Gen 2? No, yeah, we did the SH4 Gen 1, not the Gen 2.
Yeah, Gen 1 I think was Discovery. Gen 2 I think is not.
But Gen 2
But I'm not convinced it's better. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard to say, right? Like they're both just designs are not mature and the quality appears to be inconsistent.
But do you think it's basically because they're pushing all of those features at that particular price point? Because I mean, like you're not necessarily you don't see anything like that from your established manufacturers. You don't see a 34 mil tube with 30 plus mils of internal elevation adjustment with good enough image quality at $300 or $350 from Vortex, Aflan, or anybody else.
And there is a reason for it.
Well,
because
but for example,
to that price range with all those features, you will have to sacrifice the fundamentals.
But here's a question. But also, Arken, they have a direct-to-consumer distribution model for pretty much for the most part, versus Vortex. I mean, there's obviously markup. There's a 30-40% markup built in to go to the dealer. So, or do you feel that for those companies, they're going to make that up on the cost side because they're able to put together a much bigger order?
It's a much bigger order. They make up somewhat on the cost side, and they still can't quite push out something with all of this at that price range. There are other companies that go direct to consumer here and there, and somehow they're not adventurous enough to jump into the same price range as Arken is doing, and it's probably because they don't think they can keep the quality consistent.
Okay. It'll be interesting. All right, so there's a question for you. Any recommendations for an ELR optic that uses a 0.05 center dot or bigger?
Oh, ELR. What's ELR to you?
So knowing GTM, let's say 1,500 yards plus.
Okay. You need a good amount of adjustment range there. Who has 0.05? Well, it depends how much money you want to spend. Tangent is 0.05. Right? March 5-42.
Okay.
I did the reticle for it. It's it's a visible dot. It's not super tiny. So that's not a bad option. The FML TR1 reticle is the one I did, and FML3. They both have a center dot that I think is 0.06, if I remember correctly. But the way I did it, it's reasonably visible. In a less expensive price range, I did an MRAD 1 reticle for Meopta Optica 6, 5-30. And it has a reasonable amount of adjustment range. I don't know if it's quite enough, but it's not bad.
Okay, so I'm looking at the March 5-42, but I'm interested in tangent Theta 7-35 possibly too.
7-35 might have a slightly smaller dot. I have it in the safe behind me, but I don't feel like digging for it now.
And I'm going to put in my 2 cents here.
Mhm.
How the heck are so this is talking to GTM, who is in our part of our content creator group. How the heck are you here discussing $3,000 to $4,000 scopes when you're just
Which one of
contemplating
these is $3,000 to $4,000?
which ones aren't? How much are they?
Both of them aren't.
How much are they?
March is a bit over 2. Tangent 735
Okay.
is 6.5.
Tangent 6,500.
Uh-huh.
And the March is how much?
42 or 4,300.
Okay, so here we are looking at $4,000 scopes plus, and you were just complaining whether or not it's worth the money to go to SHOT Show, which is going to cost you a quarter of that price.
Well, yeah, it's all
So,
about price.
how-
It's all about price. I think the scope is more important too, so I'm with them on this.
Well, but that's because you can just basically say well, I'm sure you have both of those scopes.
Yes, yeah, behind the safe, yeah. Can pull them out if you want.
Snob.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. I wonder if Tangent Theta has a T&E program that for us mere mortals that we can actually get something along those lines. It'd actually be interesting, but
I'm not going to answer that question. Okay.
okay. There you go. So apparently there are.
Yeah, there you go. He has something. Look, so as I've mentioned many times, people are asking me how come what I review, what I pay for these things, that I pay absolutely nothing for any of these things. It costs me exactly the same to use any scope I damn well please. And there are plenty of situations where I do not use $4,000 and $5,000 scopes. Different scopes, different configurations, different reticles fit different criteria.
Yep.
This I just went hunting for pronghorn with a brand freaking new Schmidt & Bender 3218x42. It was great. And next weekend I'm heading out to a hog hunt, primarily with thermals and a few day scopes that are in $1,000 range. And then I'm gonna go on an elk hunt with a $950 tract, and I'm not gonna feel underscoped in any way, shape, or form. But I will not head out into the field with an Arken because I just don't trust.
Yep. But here's a question: do you feel that? Do you feel that? Because so obviously I'm not in the same position as you, but I do get my fair share of optics and firearms for free or just heavily discounted. Do you feel that? I mean, obviously, I do feel that it sometimes taints our perspective, or at least from the advice recommendation, because let's say, for example, if we look at it from a completely different perspective, like we can choose to shoot pretty much any optic and okay, like, yeah, here's a $500 scope, there's a $3,000 scope and so forth. But the vast majority, and like, it's easy for us to basically go out and say, yeah, you know what, like, is like, if you want a really good scope for the bare minimum money, then go spend $1,500 on a Tract or Cronus or Apex or anything else along those lines. Versus for most people, that is simply not possible.
I'm sure it taints our perspective to a good degree. On the other hand, given how many $500 to $700 scopes I recommend, probably not that much.
Yeah.
Okay. But I do break down my recommendations by price. I don't compare $5,000 scopes to $500 scopes. That would be a fool's errand. But there's one thing I absolutely insist on, and that the fundamentals of the rifle scope cannot be compromised at any price.
Good.
I will never ever choose features over the fundamentals. If the fundamentals are satisfied, you can add features, great. But if the fundamentals are not there, I will not recommend it.
Okay. And can you repeat those fundamentals for people who are just joining now?
The scope has to hold zero. Once zeroed, it has to stay zeroed. And all the controls have to function repeatably. They don't necessarily have to be accurate to spec. But as long as every adjustment is adjusted the same way every time, you'll figure out what it is, keep good data. You know what dope is, right?
Yep.
Data on previous engagements. Keep good records, and any scope, as long as it's consistent, you'll be able to make it work.
Okay.
Those fundamentals have to be satisfied. If they're not satisfied, doesn't matter how wonderful everything else is. Would you rather have a turret that's a little bit mushy and has a less than optimal feel, but it's just the same every time?
Yep.
or a turret that feels like a Swiss watch, and every click is different.
And what if somebody's just a holdover shooter and they don't click in?
Then you don't worry about the turrets. They're not particularly important to you. Then it's going to be just staying zero. But if it has exposed turrets, they better freaking be consistent. And if the turret does not adjust consistently, there is a very high probability that at some point the scope is going to lose zero because of what's happening inside.
Good stuff.
If it does not have exposed turrets, leave them alone. Right. But for example, I do a rudimentary check of tracking even on scopes like this. It's primary arms PLX C1 to 8. It's covered turrets, right? Still check tracking. Why? You can learn quite a lot about what the scope does by seeing if it adjusts consistently or not.
Okay.
And all of the scopes that I've seen that I recommend, they all are consistent.
Okay. So here's a great one, and GTM brought this up. So kind of like to move along, to go from there. I personally owned and used optics for comps, and I have a channel of rifle average guy stuff that I prefer to make content on halfway to review moved along. So this is a great point because I think it depends on also who you talk to. So you have a lot of the competition guys or people who are saving for their once in a lifetime hunt, and they're willing to basically spend a bunch of money on that, versus your average gun owner, as we discussed, is going to be somebody, let's put it this way. Vast majority of Americans don't have access to a range to shoot more than 300 yards anyway. And most people are never going to shoot at those distances. Most everyone's going to be at 100 yards or in. So does that advice or do those fundamentals, does it actually change based on your end use of the product? Because obviously, even let's say, for example, okay, we're talking like recreation versus professional. And if you're a professional and your life depends on it, it's a completely different thing. And you truly get the best thing that you can. And the cost should not be an issue on that. But even within the recreational market, so let's say, for instance, when I competed heavily in USPSA, I had different expectations for my match stuff than I did for like everyday run of the mill type stuff. And so, for example, like when I competed with my SVI 2011, I'd be like, okay, yeah, fine. You know what? You're going to spend $3,000 to $4,000 on a gun. You're probably going to spend a little bit more money to make it run right. And then you're going to spend $100 per magazine. And then you still need to tune that magazine, which is going to cost more money. But it's a match gun. And if I'm paying those match fees, I kind of expect that it's just basically par for the course. Rather than if I am just going out to the range and I bought that HK, I'm spending $50 a magazine, that gun better damn run right out of the box. And you have almost like different types of expectations for it. So do you feel that basically, kind of going back to it, the advice that you're providing and when someone is shopping, do you feel, or how important do you feel people being honest themselves and looking at how they're going to use it and the consequences of the product failing being a part of the consideration?
My basic advice doesn't change. Scope fundamentals cannot be compromised. I don't care what you do.
Okay.
Right. That's basically it. It's as simple as that. If you are not a very demanding shooter, you don't need all the features. You still need the fundamentals.
So fundamentals across any board, it's going to be the features which are going to be a little bit different.
Like I said, if I I have a soft spot for fixed power scopes, right? And I have probably 3 or 4 of them in a safe behind me. And one of them is an old $300 WFA 10 power. Really like shooting with that thing. Doesn't have any sort of features. When I have a new shooter, and I'm shooting something, I will often do something like that. Right? And go knock yourself out. Go shoot with it, get some skills, figure out what you need, what you'd like, what works for you. The last thing you want is to be at the range troubleshooting your gear. As life changes and where we live and what we do changes, access to shooting ranges changes. for a normal person who somewhat likes this, but it's not a huge thing, right? For you and I, it's a big thing. I'm at the range twice a week when I'm not traveling, sometimes more. For other people, what he's going to make it out to the range every 2 months, right? Every month.
Once a month if we're good.
Once a month if they're good, right? If on this once a month trip, everything got ruined because you bought a scope with lots of features, but where the fundamentals are compromised, and you were not able to enjoy that. How much money is that wasted once a month trip worth to you?
Well, but here's the thing, though. So we're talking about what type of fundamentals. If someone's shooting at 100 yards, then does it actually matter?
Yeah, it still has to hold zero. You still want to hit what you're aiming at, right?
Well, okay, so yeah, it has to hold zero.
Yeah, that's
but the question is by what percentage does it need to hold zero? Because then we're talking about things like
hold zero well within your ability to shoot,
and the average shooter's ability. So obviously, we had a friend of ours on the Discord group. He did a video, the one MOA hoax, where he takes a whole bunch of rifles. He goes out to the range and he challenges the people there to shoot a sub 1 inch 5-shot group with a variety of rifles at 100 yards, and no one was able to. And basically, the best group was his son at 1.5 inches. Versus here, basically, it's like, okay, I'm looking at rifles that are all should be able to. And the question is, okay, well, is it the shooter's ability, or kind of like, is it actually going to show? So basically, kind of like my I guess where I'm kind of heading with it is, if somebody's a brand new shooter, they might be a little bit more on a budget, or they don't know what they want. Even when you have, like, so for example, taking my broken EP5, the issue with it being a parallax issue past 500 yards, well, I'm going to basically guess the vast majority of Arken buyers are not going to shoot past 300 to 400 yards anyway.
What else is going to break within that thing after a few more recoil cycles?
I have no clue.
Exactly. You do not want to think about it. You do not want to be part of a discussion. You do not want that to be something you're concerned about. And as we've just discussed, there are plenty of products in a broad range of prices that you can get where the fundamentals are satisfied.
Okay. So,
you are trying to drive me to the point. It's like your whole line of questions, like you're trying to dig under what circumstances would you buy an Arken? None of them. Because
so here's the thing. I personally probably wouldn't spend my money, but I have recommended it. Well, the SH4, not the EP5. I did recommend SH4 to a couple of people. They're like, hey, you know what? I want to get something first focal plane. I know we're not going to go hunt past 100 yards anyway. And it's like, for that price point, I think it's a very competitive feature.
If they're not going to do anything past 100 yards, why do they need front focal plane?
Because that's what all the cool kids have.
Yeah.
And they wanted it.
Yeah, look, I don't give a shit about that, right? So,
I know.
Now, I have to recommend something that works.
I know, absolutely. And actually, I appreciate that. I absolutely do appreciate that. So to answer your question, I wouldn't spend my own money on an Arken because of those QC issues. I did think for the longest time that so let's put it this way. I was 100% like you up until earlier this year, where, so for example, somebody brought up that, have I contacted Arken's customer service phone number? Well, guess what? That was my biggest complaint in that video. And it was after my conversation with them at SHOT Show. I'm like, why the hell don't you put your phone number on the website? Because people don't want to, people will accept that you have issues, but it's when you ignore them, or like people just want to feel heard. So we finally put together that website, and they did give a commitment that we're going to try to do more with customer service. I talked to a bunch more people, and like they said, apparently the quality control was improving. It was only after I got my EP5, I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe that was a little bit more premature. But I was hoping that they're basically improving. And honestly, so like these so far have worked, but I don't know about others. You still have QC issues. I'm sorry, well, you still have customer service issues. My EP5 is about 6 months old, so I have no clue it has been fixed or whatnot in that regard. But I will say, though, so actually Drew brings up a great point. Slav, my new backyard is 2.8 miles long, shy of a mile wide, trapezoidal shape. Now you know why I had to have that. If I recall correctly, it's 1,392 acres pulled. Yes, my ELR range soon. So,
Drew, where do you live?
he's in Indiana. So
okay,
we
that's
can,
not
you can,
helpful. Move closer.
so you can become a channel member, and we're gonna have a party at Drew's house. So actually, the reason why I highlighted this comment, number one, because Drew's an awesome supporter of the channel, but number two, more and more people. So seemingly, like I agree that right now, I don't think it's as major of an issue. However, we're seeing massive growth in longer range shooting, where people will start noticing those parallax issues, those tracking issues, and everything else along those lines,
Okay.
that it is going to be a bigger deal.
Look, so if the scope has issues where it doesn't hold zero for whatever reason,
yeah,
even if it's a fairly new shooter and it is within their shooting area, if there is something wrong with it, after some number of recall cycles, it will get worse.
That's true. Good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do not bring unnecessary problems in your ass when you have options.
Got it.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, people should be buying Arken so they have money to get better, right? So I'm kind of mixed about that. But on the other hand, I'm looking at this and going, okay, right? It's they have their audience and it doesn't overlap with mine.
We got the invite, so this is now forever on the internet. Drew invited us. Don't call the popo.
All right.
Okay, so actually, I agree with you. It definitely needs to hold zero, because I guess I've just been pretty blessed with decent product that can hold zero, and the stuff that didn't was actually the scope bases themselves.
Bases and rings are very common problems, right?
Yeah.
But I do know how to mount scopes. It just so happens I have a little bit of experience with that.
Just
Let me think about it for a moment. Yeah, 20-some years, 150 scopes per year. Oh, I can do the math. I've done this a little bit.
Okay.
Small problems become big problems. You don't want to start with small problems.
Okay. But I'm really glad that you brought up it. Kind of like the takeaway. I think a takeaway for a lot of people here is, if you go on a lot of the forums, people focus on tracking error, that it's like our scope has like a 2% tracking error, 3, 4, 5, whatever. But you're basically saying it's more important that it's just more consistent rather than the absolute tracking error itself.
Well, okay. Well, if you're paying $2,000, it also needs to be consistent and within a certain error margin. If you're paying $500 and it turns out your click is not 0.1 milliradian but 0.09, but 0.09 every freaking time, it's perfectly viable. Problems start if you develop dope on a particular scope and then you put a different scope on that rifle, and now your dope numbers are not transferable because that one is going to be different click size, for example, something like that. But if you are starting out, you shouldn't do what I did. I mean,
which is
that is safe behind me is full, and it's not the only one. Buy one gun, buy one scope, and go shoot, rather than start accumulating stuff and playing with it because I can't help myself.
Okay.
If you have one gun and one scope and you go and practice, develop good data, develop good habits, go take a class or two, you will figure out how to use that scope, and you will also figure out what's important for you. If this is a serious hobby for you, any $500-$600 scope you get is going to be a stepping stone, because eventually you will find a way to step up. What you want to get out of this first serious scope, the $500-$600 is a serious scope.
It's a serious scope. It's a serious investment for a lot of people.
It's a serious amount of money. It's a serious scope. But if you're serious about this, at some point you're going to make a step up. You're not necessarily going to, not everybody steps up to a tangent data. And honestly, there's no there's no good financial reason to get a tangent data. This is not where you get the most for your money. As much as I love those scopes, they're amazing.
Yeah.
This is not your best bang for the buck. Best bang for the buck right now is in that $1,500 range, like the tracked optics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And over time, a lot of people will find a way, clearly, because I talk to a lot of these people. With your $500-$600 scope or $400 scope, Helix, FFP, whatever else, you are trying to get two things. You're trying to develop good skills, good habits, and trying to figure out what you need, what works for you. If you practice diligently and get instruction, you will sooner than later figure out what you need, and then you'll have to find a way to acquire that, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Used, whatever.
So I would say you probably agree to my theory that I don't necessarily buy into the buy once, cry once for a newer shooter. And the reason why is because if you're a newer shooter, you don't know what your preferences are. And it would be a sizable investment. So I'll use kind of like my particular example.
If you're new at this, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. So for example, like, and this is going to be straight out of the video that I did on the Arkens, which was, so my first serious scope was a Leupold Mark V HD 5-25. By all intents and purposes, it's a fantastic scope. It was the first scope that I shot past a mile with it. Actually, it was the first scope I shot past 1,000 yards with it. But I don't shoot it that much. Why? Because that reticle choice, so it was a regular TMR reticle, and it's just not my preference. I hate the thick, full vertical stadia line on top, and it's not a Christmas tree style reticle. The next scope is the Tractoric 4.5-30, which is a fantastic scope, but I seldom use that either because it's an MOA and not mil. And anytime I go to the range, it's tough for me to mentally switch out of it. And so I personally, like, I feel fortunate enough I didn't spend money on those scopes. It was because I'm a gun tuber that, I mean, I was able to trade my abilities in order to get those scopes. But if I was a newer shooter getting into this and I just spent $2,000 on that Leupold or $1,700 on that tracked, and I bought it in MOA, not mil, or I bought it with a reticle that I wasn't happy with, I would be slightly irritated, or I would be trying to justify it in my mind that this is really the best thing. This is really the best thing, while all knowing that, like, crap, I made the wrong decision myself. So that's why I'd rather somebody spends $500-$600 on a Strike Eagle or a Venom, or even, let's say, for example, if you know you have a good one of these, and you can basically figure out with it, it's an investment, but it's not going to be a $2,000 mistake, perhaps. And when you're looking to sell it, you will lose money, but at most you're going to lose $500 as opposed to a lot more money with the more expensive options. And learn on it, spend the money on ammo, spend the money on classes. So then, while you're saving money, when you do make that sizable investment where you are going to buy once, cry once, well, I would say buy twice, cry once. You're going to know what your preferences are, because I don't think, I don't think you're going to say that the Leupold Mark V is a bad scope. The Tractoric is not a bad scope. They just aren't within my preferences for the type of shooter that I am, but there might be a shooter for whom those really are the best way to go.
So what is the right scope for you that you found? Now I'm curious.
So personally, right now, what I really, really like is, I don't have it yet, but the Burris XTR Pro, because it has the reticle that I like within the features that I care about. So for me, what's important is I like a clean Christmas tree style reticle that's going to have at least 15 mils of holdovers, where it's still, you can use 15 mils. A lot of the scopes, they just cut it off at 8 or 10. And I could end up using a little bit more, especially for rimfire shooting. It needs to be, once again, consistent on the tracking. Everything needs to feel okay. And it needs to be in mil, because everything else in my mind is already programmed in mil. So right now, my favorite is that the new 4-25 tracked with 47 mils of internal elevation adjustment. It's not the absolute best image quality, but for the feature set, as I'm playing more with it, it's just a fantastic scope. It hits everything that I wanted to do at a price point that I really, really like.
Excellent. A perfectly cogent explanation what works for you, and it is a result of having had a chance to play with a few and figuring out both what you like and what works for you, and also what is either meaningless or distracting.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest thing in my process is like inconsistently. So when I went out to the media event with Ruger and we had like everyone's dialing in, but it's like I possibly because I'm coming into it from the gun gamer USPSA standpoint, I'm comfortable holding over up to 10 or 15 mils anyway. Just like it just seems more natural, especially if it's a reticle that's usable. I know I've seen some of the reticles that you've designed. It's like I'm like, wow, it's like it actually makes sense. And it's not like a Tremor 3 where you just get lost in the reticles.
Yeah,
Like
tremors are just a mess.
so it's like, why not? But here's the kicker though. So when I started getting into this, and I'm like, okay, when I knew I wanted a Christmas tree style reticle, I was infused completely head over heels by like, I guess it's almost the same thing like when people get into watches. It's like it needs to be busy because if it's not as busy as a Tremor 3 or like the primary arms reticles, there's like I'm missing something and I'm not getting the value out of the reticle. It's like, what do you mean there's no range finding feature built into this? And then you learn.
Yeah, we're not going to rehash the reticle, but that's experience, right?
Yeah.
And you had a lot of shooting experience before that, just not as much with this type of shooting, and it took a little time. It also was not instantaneous. Look, in the olden days, right, when I started doing this, 20, 25 years ago, the standard progression for a precision shooter was that you were going to buy SWFA, fixed power, fixed 10 power scope for $300, put it on your slightly accurate 308 Remington and go shoot.
Yeah.
And after getting the most you can out of that platform, after that, you figured out what you're going to upgrade to. There were not that many options back then. There were a few. But one of the upgrade options was the Leopold Mark IV. That quite a few of them had tracking and holding zero issues, and people would go from a $300 SWFA to a $1,800 Mark IV and go, "What did I just do?" Now all of a sudden, my accuracy went down because this thing doesn't hold zero. There was several batches of them that had issues.
So here's a question. What do you think for people like, like obviously there's people in our community or people who are affluent and they have what I would call FU money. So like they're going to go to the gun store and they're going to be like, hey, I want to go shoot long range. They're going to go and shoot past 300 or 400 yards. And like, I want to get basically something, a really good package. So we're going to spend $2,000 to $3,000 on an precision rifle. So call it, let's say, Ruger Precision Custom Shop or Savage Elite Precision. So not full-blown custom, but like one of those PRS ready style rifles. And they're going to be like, okay, so you're going to spend $2,500 or $3,000 in a Night Force. And these people don't know how to use it at all. Do you still think
I once saw one in the range with the scope mounted backwards. That was fun.
Well, for my example was, so like I was at the range and there was a gentleman there who bought a reproduction. I think it was a Barrett MRAD with a Heinsold scope. I believe that like it was an overrun of one of the military units or something along those lines.
Yeah, there has never been a single overrun Heinsold sold in the market ever.
Okay. So basically, like the guy is like, I assume that he knows how to do it. Halfway through it, he asked me, hey, can you help me zero with this thing? Because he didn't know which way the turrets operate. And I'm like, okay, and half hour earlier, he's like, wow, check out my $16,000 rifle package and all that stuff. I'm like, so with those people, just be
when I
better
lived
off.
when I lived in LA, I saw that a fair bit. It happens.
So I guess there's no solution to that. It's just people are just going to do it.
There's no people. Look, it's a lot of the guys who do this are pretty smart guys, right? They are successful in what they do. When I lived in LA, every time I saw that it was some overweight software developer who at some point decided that he likes playing computer games. Now he wants to go shoot the real thing. And most of them would invest the money, go shooting 3 times, and then never go shooting again. And there were some who learned, right? Because they're generally intelligent people, but just their knowledge and expertise and their chosen profession does not immediately translate into other things, like shooting and like firearms. I've always discouraged that, Right. Once again, back then it was before Remington went to shit. It was a Remington and a 10 powers WFA, then a Savage, then Tikkas became more prolific, and my absolutely standard recommendation to anyone who wants to get into this, if they're not on the tightest of all budgets, is to get a Tikka, one of the Tikkas in T3X and 6.5 Creed. Get a 500, 600-ish scope on that, like the stuff that we just discussed, the Venom, Strike Eagle, Titan, Helix, whatever. There are several of them around.
Yeah.
Get some ammo, go shoot, go watch a PRS competition, see what they do, go get some instruction. Use a good quality mount, obviously, and spend the next 6 months shooting, getting some basic instruction. Then spend the next 6 months fucking with the stock to make sure that the cheek rises in the same way, trying to figure out how to fit the stock to your body. If not, replace the stock, etc. Figure that out. And only then, after all of that is done, after you figure out how to fit this rifle to you and you to the rifle, then you go and consider upgrading the scope if you feel dissatisfied in any way with what you have.
Absolutely. Awesome. So there's a question, and we'll start wrapping up from this one. Dark Lord, what is the best way to find mechanical zero, box method, mirror method, or count clicks, or all of the above?
So mechanical zero and optical zero are not the same thing, so I'm not, and people use them interchangeably. So I assume if you're asking about mechanical zero, the simplest way is just count clicks, right? Figure out how many clicks go from one end to another, divide by 2, and use that as a starting point. With most modern rifle scopes, you don't have to be at an absolute perfect mechanical or optical center to get good performance. There's a range there. As long as you're somewhere within that range, you're fine as a starting point. That gets close enough, and then you just put a piece of paper at 25 yards, get that bullet drilled smack in the middle of it, then move it to 100 yards. Get that bullet going smack in the middle of it. And if you're okay with that zero, you're fine. Lock it in and then start confirming what it does at longer distances. Keep good notes.
And of course, make sure that I think the ammo is going to be a major difference with it, especially like if you're going to start switching ammo, that point of impact is going to be quite a bit different as well. And I think people kind of take that for granted.
Yeah, one of the reasons I've switched my recommendations for starter rifle from 308 Winchester to 6 excuse me, 6.5 Creed is that there is a ton of shitty Milsurg 308 ammo out there. And it's hard to find truly shitty 6.5 ammo.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, it's interesting. So when I was reviewing the 308 rifles that I have on the channel, so we did the Ruger S-FAR, and then before that it was the Thompson Center LRR and Howa 1500 Oryx chassis one. The 308 ammo, it's like we bought a bunch of different ammo from the store, and it ranged from 1 MOA to 3.5 MOA. But with 6.5 Creedmoor ammo, I mean, it's generally been, look, you might have your window would be between, let's say, 1 to 2 MOA, and a lot of it is much more consistent in terms of point of impact, even downrange. So I'm a big fan of it. Okay, so here's actually
the funny thing is that I don't even own a 6.5 Creed rifle, so
you have to join. How dare you?
I've shot a lot of them, but I need to get one. I would like, for what I do, 6.5 PRC makes more sense, so I'm probably gonna get
yes. I have trouble finding mechanical center by counting clicks with mushy turrets. What is the best way to find center? Okay, so he actually followed up with it. So he has trouble finding.
What kind of scope do you have that turrets are so mushy you can't count them? Look, I mean, turret's gonna go through several revolutions. You don't need to count every click. It doesn't have to be down to 1 click, right?
Yeah. Especially if you're deciding
1.5, 2.5, 3.5, whatever, and figure out where half of that is.
Yeah, and especially if you're starting at 25 yards, it's almost like
correct.
I'm gonna do a video on this. I actually have one filmed. I just wasn't happy with it, so I might refilm it.
The mirror method works and all that, but in a lot of scopes, so mirror method is when you basically
what is that?
Against the mirror, and the rest, so that the mechanic, the front of the objective is in the mirror. Then you look at it, and what you'll see 2 reticles, and you start adjusting turrets until they coincide with each other. Basically, it's called autocollimation. That generally works if the body of the scope is square, and some of them it is, and some of them it's not. Since knowing where the perfect mechanical zero is not hugely critical, you just need to be close enough to the center to be on paper, or close to it when you set in. Yeah, I prefer just counting clicks, but you can definitely do it with the mirror, and that's probably going to get you close enough as well.
Awesome. So I would actually, so you had the recommendation, the Tika. I would say right now for the price point, that CZ600 is for $500. The action is smoother than the Tika and stupid accurate. Once you kind of look at the gun for what it is, not what it was promised to be, that CZ600, you're gonna love it. So it's under $500, and then there's $100 mail-in rebate on it right now. It is superb.
I have zero experience with CS600. I like the 550s, but CZ has been making so many weird decisions that I just don't know what to make out of them. I generally recommend Tikas because they're safe. There are very few bad Tika barrels. CZ has been going through so many changes that you don't know what to make out of them, but it's somewhere on my list to take a look at the 600 series.
All right.
Eventually,
So, and there's actually this one I'm not familiar with, so I'm kind of going through, wrapping up. Have a cheap Tasco Pro Horn scope on my Remington BDL 30-06 for 25 years, and it never misses. Still clear as day one. So here's a question: did image? So what can been like? And you kind of often hear these type of comments, or like you look at a scope from 15 or 20 years ago, and when you're just looking for them, like the image quality is actually pretty nice. I mean, obviously these scopes aren't as feature packed. What do you think has been like the biggest difference or advances in scope technology over the past few decades? Or is it image quality, or is it?
Well, image quality has been good. Image quality has moved down in price range, right? In the past, every once in a while you get a cheap scope that was decent optically, but I've never seen a Tasco pronghorn that was decent optically, right? So maybe one exists, and he's got it. The biggest change probably has been the erector ratio, the magnification ratio. That's gone up substantially, and proliferation of front focal plane scopes. A little bit harder to make. The reticles a little bit harder to make cleanly. FFP and erector ratio is probably the biggest difference.
Okay. All right, and I think we got most of these. Okay, obviously reticles are reticle choices. Steven actually made comments of he had personal bad interactions with the Navy SEAL at Arken.
Mike Riley. So I know Mike Riley. Like, he's not an emotional guy. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to be all extroverted and super friendly, that's probably not Mike. But I've chatted with him. He's, a perfectly reasonable guy. I don't know. I didn't get any sort of unusual vibe from him, good or bad. But to be fair, I spent a lot of time with military people, so maybe I'm used to it.
This is actually, I think, also a big issue for the company, and I think it's almost inexcusable. So 6 months to ship a scope showing in stock is what happened to me. I called and I was like, "What's going on?" Ever to ship it, and magically finally did. By the way, iBox sucks on the EPL4, so I would say the iBox and the EPL4 is much better than the SH4 or the EP5. So if you think the EP5, if you think the EPL4 is bad, don't look at the other scopes.
Well, it is also entirely possible that sucks on his and decent enough, and yours assembly quality will affect that.
Okay, and there's that. But no, so I mean, it's kind of like one of the things that I told them is like, okay, like obviously people are, when you're trying to push the boundaries, such as what we're doing, there will be issues. I mean, everybody has issues, like you mentioned, but you don't have almost like amateurish type of mistakes, such as.
How long has Arken been around now?
Now we're coming on to at least 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, at this stage, this should be stabilizing.
Yeah.
Right. 1 more year, and if it doesn't stabilize, it'll pretty much become a joke. And eventually, the market doesn't tolerate this shit.
That's a good point. Yeah, because I mean,
the cost and the impressions of all these issues will accumulate, right? And what's going to happen basically is the influencers will get tired of getting beat up by Arken scopes breaking, and they'll just stop recommending them, and that's it. And once you lose that reputation, it's going to be very, very, very hard to develop.
Well, and also, for example, talking to Aaron, Anarchy Outdoors, he does compete heavily in PRS. He was like, well, there hasn't been a match where I go to where an Arken scope hasn't broken on the line. But here's the thing, though. I think a lot of the influencers, I mean, because we have so many choices, so many varieties, we don't actually, unless you're taking your time or you explicitly, let's say, for example, hey, we're going to go out to the range, we're going to put 1,000 rounds through this gun, we're going to test it in a variety of different facilities. We don't often have the capacity to really do a detailed long-term deep dive on it because we have so much stuff that we're able to go shoot. So for example, even kind of like out of my gun collection, like even when I was competing before becoming a YouTuber, my USPSA match guns had hundreds of thousands of rounds through them, but everything else I had was pretty much pristine. And I know oftentimes with a lot of the rifles here, like so in the beginning when I get them, I do try to get at least 500 to 1,000 rounds through them before actually doing a deeper dive into the video. But after I'm done with it, unless I'm doing a direct comparison with something else, I'm going to be shooting something else or something a little bit different. And like if you don't have, so I would say that like it's not necessarily the influencers that are going to discover the issues, but rather the people who are going to buy it and
Correct.
really run
and,
it
and yell at the influencers.
Yes.
Right? I found something a couple of years ago. I was talking to a bunch of people, and I found something very interesting. My most attentive audience, as it turns out, is the influencers.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I don't have a very large audience, right? Because I'm kind of crotchety and annoying. But I do know what I'm talking about. As it turns out, my biggest people who pay the most attention to me are the influencers because they don't want to get caught with their pants down when they recommend a scope.
Yeah.
Right. I say something nice about a particular scope, and all of a sudden I start seeing it pop up in a bunch of videos from people with much larger audiences than mine, because that gives me a little bit of confidence that I'm not going to get yelled at. Okay. It is a factor. People don't like being yelled at. People don't like to recommend stuff that's crap. Okay. People don't like to recommend stuff that gets broken down because eventually, if enough of it breaks down, it comes back to bite you in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
And if, from what you said earlier, the apparently lucrative affiliate program that Arken had, if that's no longer a significant motivating factor, unless Arken cleans up their quality control issues, the writing is going to be on the wall.
Yeah.
On top of it, the overall market for guns and optics is definitely softening.
Oh, yeah.
Optics, definitely. With all the wars happening, we'll see how that goes.
So it's actually, it's interesting that I'm sorry, it's interesting that you brought up the confirmation in the optics market, because I just got off the phone with a mid-sized firearms manufacturer that also owns a couple of retail outlets. And they're basically telling me that they're, for a couple of months during the summertime, they were in deep financial issues, and quite a few of their peers were also on the verge of bankruptcy, like Wyndham Weaponry was. Like they're like, okay, it picked up a little bit. So like it's interesting that's the same thing that you're seeing on the optics side. So sorry,
it's
go ahead.
There. So not all optics companies are going to survive this soft market.
Interesting.
Right. Some of them eventually will not be able to pay their bills. They will try to push even lower, even poorer QC stuff out to generate some cash, and that never works out. Not once that I can think of.
Wow. So you're making a pretty bold prediction.
In 3 years, there's not going to be as many optics brands as we have now. The ones who have a reasonable amount of money and stay true to the course and deliver a good product while keeping their costs reasonable will survive. Some others will not. I do not know which ones are going to survive, which will not, right? I'm not making any specific predictions on specific brands. I have no insight into their financial state and things like that, right? Vortex is going to survive. Berstein are going to survive.
Yeah.
Element very likely is going to survive because they've got a fax behind them. And Element's doing a lot of things right, not as fast as I maybe would want to, but they're doing a lot of things right. Quite a few others. But there's a ton of different optics brands out there, and I don't know if they're going to survive or not.
And I guess it's not even a question of, let's say, whether it's somebody, if it's a serious company with serious engineers who are OEMing, who have people OEM for them. It's not even just those guys. It's obviously, it's also like a lot of the companies that are just going to an OEM and slapping their name on the product without actually doing anything on it. And so, for example, like I know there's a couple of importers that I follow on Instagram, and like now all of a sudden they have optics now too. I'm like, okay, interesting.
So optics generally offer pretty good margins, so it's a very appealing market to get into. But you have to develop a good reputation. You have to maintain it. If you want to see how that works, have you been following that whole hoopla with Liberty Optics on Sniper's Hide?
And now I don't go on the hide that often.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Liberty Optics.
It's a friend. Was a friend of mine, right? He apparently vanished and took some people's money with him. And he was doing some stuff with Vortex, and a lot of people hoarded Vortex stuff from them that was going to be dropshipped by Vortex.
Was he a dealer or was he?
He was a dealer.
Okay, so Liberty Optica is a dealer.
Yeah. And once again, like he was one of the guys I recommended. I've known him for 20 some years. Like the first time I went to SHOT Show, he made me a badge. So I'm absolutely shocked by this turn of events. I hope he's okay, but I don't know.
Wow.
Vortex, VP of freaking Vortex, jumped into Sniper's Hide thread, gave everybody his email address and a phone number, and said if Liberty Optics took their money, promised them something, to contact them, and he'd look up what happened in the system, if their scope got paid for or not, etc. And basically went above and beyond to help people.
Wow.
When Vortex was absolutely not involved, not at fault with any of this shit.
Yep.
As we go along, it will take that kind of a commitment to the customer, kind of a willingness to talk to people. That's going to be the separation between those who make it and those who do not.
And a lot of companies, I mean, let's say, for example, if one person gets screwed over or whatnot, I mean, it's easy. But if it's going to be a lot more people or you have consistent quality issues, that's going to require deep pockets, and not everyone's going to be able to do that.
Correct. It becomes a tricky thing. But one of the things that Vortex does very well, and nobody else is paying any attention to this, well, not nobody else, most don't, is how good they are in generating goodwill with their customers. Right? And not for frivolous things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Investment, personal attention, investment, time, and money, given how large the company is, it's a tough one. Vortex does this incredibly well. Many other companies are kind of looking at it, trying to see how to do it as well. Not everybody has the bandwidth. But just with this thing, with Liberty Optics, Vortex has converted a bunch of people into lifetime customers.
Yeah.
It's going to be now their first choice whenever they decide to go look for a new scope.
Awesome.
Just because they feel, justifiably it seems, that Vortex really makes it a point, goes out of their way to make sure that their customers are not left behind.
Yeah. So I guess final one, a piece of question for you is, let's say, for example, we are going into softening economy. If somebody actually wanted to start their own optics brand or optics company, what is your recommendation to them? And let's say, for example, if they want to compete with, at let's say that $500-$600 first focal plane reticle rifle scope market. Besides, don't, or have very deep pockets.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of people doing it. I'm actually consulting for one of them just because a couple of guys that I found to be good people, and they're very small. Oh, Jesus. $500-$600 means China, maybe Philippines if you go direct. Right now, all the OEMs have long lead times, but that's going to improve, and they'll start getting hungrier for business.
Yeah.
The basic, the name of the game is what are you going to do different and how you're going to maintain quality. And that's basically it. No matter how you slice it, there's going to have to be an investment of money, time, and effort.
Yep. And from the money side, I mean, like, I guess from the money side, I mean, like, if somebody even comes up with a good new product or whatnot, I mean, you're not going to be, I mean, like, you're going to need sizable money in order to even get attention from people who can get you attention.
And not even that, you're also going to have to invest in a facility where you can store this thing and look at it.
Yep.
Right. Given that established brands do a spectacularly good job of keeping the quality reasonable and checking vast majority of the products they get, it is very hard to get away with less than that. Okay. Because what do you think happens? Especially if you're trying to push away Amazon price, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to send you shit, and if you don't change it, they don't check it, it'll all come through. If you want to look at a model, what to do with a small company, folks, look at tracked optics. They are quite small. They should be bigger for how good they are. But the basic idea is strong ties to OEMs, fight your battles, go direct to consumer, don't go through general distribution model. Use the internet. Be good at using forums, influencers, and all that. But don't do it. Don't do it the Arken way. The quality of the product has to be first, last, and always.
Yep. Very cool.
Look at tracked.
Well, you still need. How much money do you think somebody would need? A couple million?
That I don't know. I could probably do it with less.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that.
Not easy, but it's doable.
Final one. On Instagram, I saw Delta is coming out with a new striker or something like that, or they have something new?
Two of them, 3.5 to 21 by 44, and 1 to 10.
Yeah, the 3.5 to 21.
28. Hold on a sec. Give me one moment.
I'm sure you have one. See, this is always fun with Ilya. Like, he'll just go into the back, and so anything optics questions, now would be the time, or forever hold your peace. And thank you again to those that are channel members, sent super chats. Make sure you smash the like button. Ooh.
This guy, right?
Possibly. I just saw Instagram ads.
Well, it's Delta 3.5 to 21 by 44. Kind of their crossover scope, about 27 ounces. Pretty interesting reticle.
Wow.
40-something mils of adjustment.
Wow.
Windage turret is covered. Elevation is not covered, but has 0 stop. Sight focus down, I think, 10 meters, something like that. Where is it? 10 meters. Illumination. Really nice scope. Like, I'm quite impressed with it. I went, and that was my backup scope for the antelope hunt. Didn't get just to use it for the hunt, but I've spent a lot of time shooting with it off of my 308 fix. It's a nice scope. It'll be... Yeah, it's kind of a unique-ish configuration. Because it goes from 3.5 to 21, but with a 44mm objective, which allowed them to keep it fairly trim. With field of view is a little bit wider on the same magnification than the previous strikers. Let's say newer generation eyepiece. Same one, I think, all related on the 3.5 to 21 and the 1 to 10. I'm quite impressed with it.
What's the price point?
I don't remember. A couple of grand, I think.
Okay. And for those not familiar with Delta, who are they? They're like a European company?
Delta is from Poland, but they don't make stuff in Poland so far. The scopes are OEM'd in the this particular one says Light Optics Works. They OEM stuff in Japan, China, and Philippines. All the strikers are Japanese. Delta's been around for a while. They're a smaller company. Again, good commitment to customer support, customer service. They do a good job. I used to do some consulting for them, not so much now. I don't have time. The reticle in this one I did not design, but I had a chance to offer input. So I knew of this scope for quite a long time. It takes time to get anything going with the Japanese OEMs. If you like crossover scopes, it's one of the better ones currently available.
Okay. So here's a question. So taking a company like Delta, they are much smaller. They have far less representation in the United States. Would that be a brand that you recommend to people, or only, let's say, for example, to more experienced type shooters? Because there's probably not, obviously, we spent time talking about Vortex and the level of support that you're going to get the difference between the two.
So Delta happens to be one of the companies I like. The quickness of the support is not going to be the same as with Vortex. but their presence in the US is growing, and that's likely to get better. That's usually how it works. Right now, if something's broken, they probably send it back to one of the dealers, at least 3 I can think of, and they just swap it out. That's probably how it's going to work most of the time. Something more expensive, maybe it has to go back to Poland. I don't know. But they do support their product, do so well. If nobody ever took a chance on small companies, they would never become large companies, right?
Yep. And I
But
guess
Delta's also been around for 20 some years, so they're not a fly by night shop. They've been around for what's family-owned business. I know the owner seems like a good guy.
Okay. But basically, the question is, okay, somebody's been around for 20 years. Is it almost like time to almost shit or get off the pot? Like, do you either
they're quite successful in Europe. They just haven't been in the US.
Not in the United States.
Yeah, but in
Very
Europe,
cool.
they're quite successful. They got in the US a few years ago. That's how I got to know them. They asked for my help in terms of how to configure products and what would work for this market and all that. So I've had a very cordial relationship with them. But I'm picky in terms of who I work with. So I went and met with the guy who owns the company and spent quite a lot of time with him. I think he's a good dude. I think they're looking to do the right thing.
Very cool. Awesome. So we're approaching 3 hours. So I think we're going to start wrapping this one up right here. It's already getting late your time. It's extremely late my time, but I slept in today, so it was good on that.
I have to get up at 6 a.m, get the kids ready and take them to school. So
fun stuff. How's your house going?
Same.
Okay.
Hopefully in the next few days they'll just start repairs.
Okay. And when is your next live stream so people can pop on?
I honestly haven't scheduled one yet. I am shooting a lot of thermals in this coming week, preparing for a hawk hunt. I am hoping to live stream one of the sightings from the range in the evening on Wednesday, but we'll see.
Awesome. Very, very cool. So that was a deep discussion of the new Arkens, and basically the type of people who should consider it or who shouldn't consider it. And let me know what you think. Hopefully, I know we probably rustled some feathers on this one, but it's like every company is important and they do push the envelope. And I think that success that Arken is having is also rubbing off, and it puts pressure on more established OEMs to come out with more consistent product, and to push their own envelope, because I'm fairly sure that if it wasn't for the Arkens, we probably wouldn't get a Venom as a response. We wouldn't get other scopes at those similar type of price ranges, or at least the prices wouldn't be coming down in the direction that they are. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for all the channel members. And we're going to be meeting at Drew's house so we can go shoot, was it 2.89 miles? Go along with that. Ilya, thank you very much for joining me tonight. And
absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
And we'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place. Thanks for watching. Keep on squatting, and I'll see you in the next video.